Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Miriam Bilte. Miriam Bilte grew up in Hildesheim, Germany, where she excelled in school after completing her studies. She was accepted into the University of Hanover, where she studied mechanical engineering for 5 years and earned a master's degree immediately after graduation. She found a good job as an engineer at a small design company a few years later. In mid-2018, she changed jobs to work for a larger car manufacturer, where she took on the role of design engineer. In 2019, Miriam lived in her hometown of Hildesheim. She was not in a serious relationship, so she continued to live with her parents. She worked for an international company and frequently traveled abroad. At the end of March 2019, the company sent her on another business trip, this time to Southeast Asia to meet with some suppliers. Miriam took additional leave to combine work with vacation. Miriam decided to extend her stay in Thailand. She had heard about the beautiful beaches and rich history of the country and wanted to experience this beauty firsthand. After completing her business negotiations with the suppliers, she boarded a flight to Bangkok. Although traveling alone can be risky, Miriam is experienced and knows how to navigate a foreign country safely. She prioritized her safety during her short vacation by following some important rules, avoiding going out alone after dark, keeping her valuables safe, and always being wary of strangers. Unfortunately, we cannot predict other people's intentions, making it difficult to know whether they might cause us harm. Soon after arriving in Bangkok, she took a trip to Pattaya, located in the southeast of Thailand. Just off the coast was Koh Si Chang, an island she wanted to explore. On Sunday, April 7, 2019, at the age of 20, Miriam bought a ferry ticket to Koh Si Chang for a few hours, planning to return to Pattaya in the evening. Her simple goal was to enjoy fresh local seafood, visit some of the island's ancient temples, and soak up the seaside atmosphere. By noon, Miriam had arrived on the island. She quickly rented a motorbike, a common mode of transportation in Thailand. Using Google Maps, she planned her route and set off on her adventure. One of her destinations was a white stone temple located on a hilltop. The temple was famous for housing the footprint of the Buddha and was established by the ruling Chakri dynasty, making it important to Buddhists. The temple was tucked away in a quiet location. Miriam loved being in peaceful places, away from the hustle and bustle of tourists. She had no idea what awaited her there. After reaching her destination, Miriam parked her motorbike near the flower stall at the foot of the hill. She greeted the vendor and headed toward the temple. The hike ahead was challenging and best suited for those in good physical condition. Surveillance footage captured Miriam climbing the stone steps to the monument. However, Miriam ascended the steps but never returned. This was puzzling because the stone steps were the only way down the hill. Her rented motorbike remained parked at the foot of the hill, near the flower stall. Although the temple is situated on a beautiful hill, there are no other attractions nearby, making it unclear why she took so long and why she did not return. As night fell and she had not yet contacted anyone, her relatives in Germany began to worry that something might have happened to her. The next morning, April 8, a Thai tourist walked along a deserted path leading to the white stone temple that housed the footprint of the Buddha. About halfway up, he noticed a small ravine beside the stairs. Curious, he went closer and was shocked to discover the body of a young woman with fair skin. She was found dead, lying between two large boulders, covered in branches, leaves, and old debris. The visitor quickly alerted the police to the gruesome discovery. Officers rapidly climbed the hillside to the site where the body was discovered. The victim was identified as a German woman named Miriam Bilte. After examining the scene, police determined that her death was not an accident. Miriam was found with a broken leg and multiple injuries to her head and face, consistent with being struck by a heavy object, such as a brick or stone. It was tragic when it was discovered that Miriam had been abused before her death. However, the exact circumstances surrounding her death remain unclear. The stone shrine dedicated to the Buddha has only one entrance and exit, which was monitored by a surveillance camera that recorded Miriam as she climbed the hill. It was soon revealed that an unidentified young man had been seen going up the stairs with Miriam, making him the prime suspect. The police quickly identified him. Security footage showed him arriving on a motorbike and parking at the foot of the hill. He spoke briefly to the florist and bought a small bouquet of marigolds before heading to the temple. The florist noticed the young man closely following Miriam and then saw him walking down the stone stairs alone. He was wearing dark clothes, and the florist thought his jacket and pants looked wet and had something red on them. Concerned, the florist asked the young man if everything was okay. The man said he had just fallen, sensing something was wrong. The florist tried to recall the young man's appearance and noted down the model of his motorbike and the license plate number. The florist then shared his observations about the suspicious man with the police. The police discovered that the motorbike belonged to a 24-year-old man named Ranakorn Romruin, a local resident of Koh Sichang Island. Ranakorn lived alone and owned a small boat as well as a motorbike. He worked as a beach cleaner during the day, where he paddled around in the boat, collected trash, and cleaned the beach. Locals described him as a quiet and solitary man after work. Ranakorn would often go home, watch TV, and drink beer, leading a lifestyle similar to many other young people his age. However, few knew that he was struggling with serious personal problems. Ranakorn battled drug addiction and regularly used methamphetamine. The day after Miriam was murdered, Ranakorn was arrested as he returned home from work in the evening. He was taken to the police station for questioning, and a few hours later, he confessed to the crime. Ranakorn stated that on the morning of Sunday, April 7, he woke up, skipped breakfast, drank 2 beers. He then used methamphetamine and got on his motorbike to travel around the island. His trip ended at the foot of a temple. Ranakorn spotted Miriam as she was climbing the stone stairs. At that moment, an idea struck him when he saw an attractive girl with fair skin at the foot of the hill. He noticed a flower stall and bought a small bouquet of marigolds. Ranakorn then followed Miriam up the stairs. When he caught up with her, he tried to strike up a conversation. Miriam felt uncomfortable, and after he gave her the flowers, he suggested they could be intimate on the hill before going to the temple. Miriam refused, but Ranakorn continued to ask inappropriate questions. Miriam became frightened and tried to run away from the stranger, but he kept chasing her. Eventually, he grabbed her and dragged her into the dense forest. Miriam screamed and struggled to escape, but there was no one around to help her. After he completed what he intended to do, Miriam found an opportunity to escape. She ran down the hill, putting as much distance as possible between herself and him. Meanwhile, Ranakorn had a disturbing thought. He realized he needed to catch up with her to eliminate any possibility of being caught. If he let her go, he would likely end up in jail. Ranakorn stood up, dusted himself off, and ran after Miriam. Unfortunately, in her panic, while descending the hill, she fell and injured her leg. Ranakorn caught up to her and picked up a large rock from the ground. Hitting her on the head, Miriam died from the injury. Ranakorn then dragged her up the hill, placed her on a rocky spot, and covered her with leaves, twigs, and old rubbish. However, the body was eventually discovered by a Thai tourist after committing the crime. Ranakorn returned home, quickly washed his bloody clothes, lay down on the couch, watched TV, and finished a pack of cigarettes. This was his last evening of freedom during the reenactment of the crime scene. Ranakorn recounted the final moments of Miriam's life while his head was covered with a blue bag to protect his identity. Thai police closely monitored the investigation And just 3 months after the tragedy, the trial began. The main evidence against Runcorn included surveillance camera footage, a witness's testimony from the flower stall, and Runcorn's own confession, although Runcorn did not directly apologize for his actions. His mother did so in court on his behalf. The mother said that she and Runcorn did not live together and were unaware of her son's actions. His actions shocked her, and she urged the court to impose the harshest sentence on him. In Thailand, the maximum penalty for murder is the death penalty. Runcorn's mother feared that if he were released, he might commit a similar crime and take the lives of others. She supported the court in imposing the death penalty on her son. Runcorn is currently awaiting execution. The island community was horrified by the news of the death of 26-year-old Miriam. Thailand is generally a peaceful country, and it is sad that a local man would treat a tourist so cruelly. Koh Si Chang has never seen such brutality before, and the residents hope this incident will not disrupt their lives or deter visitors. The Koh Si Chang community came together to express their grief. People of all ages and occupations gathered at the site of Miriam's death. Carrying candles and flowers, they mourned, prayed for her soul, and offered their condolences to her family. Thailand's economy is heavily dependent on tourism, and negative publicity can be very damaging to the country's economy. This is why the Thai authorities prioritize the swift resolution of crimes involving tourists. However, there are times when details of such cases are kept under wraps and not shared with the public. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Isla Reynolds. Isla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010 in Waterville, Maine, USA. With blonde hair, blue eyes, and a charming smile, she was an adorable child who loved music and dancing. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro, had a brief romantic relationship in the summer of 2009, which resulted in Trista becoming pregnant. However, the couple broke up and Justin was initially a bit apprehensive about becoming a father, even doubting whether he was really the biological father of the child. When Trista gave birth to Isla, the child bore a strong resemblance to Justin, but he initially refused to acknowledge Isla as his daughter. However, after a paternity test in July 2010, Justin finally accepted his role as her father. As a result, Child Protective Services ordered Justin to pay child support in December 2010. Although Trista and Justin did not have a formal custody agreement in court, they did have an agreement in which Trista, who resided in Portland, would have primary physical custody. It was not until mid-2011, after Isla's first birthday, that Justin began spending time with his daughter. Since he lived an hour and a half away and visits were scheduled to be during the day and very brief, they agreed that Justin could occasionally take Isla with him but never overnight. Trista gave birth to her first child, Isla. Soon after, she became pregnant with her new boyfriend Raymond's child. In 2011, Trista had her second child, a son named Raymond Jr., and Isla became a big sister. Trista cared for both children until October 13, 2011, when Child Protective Services intervened due to concerns. The details of the complaint that led to the meeting are unclear, but it is known that Trista had a substance abuse problem. That day, officials gave her an ultimatum: overcome her addiction or lose custody of her children. In order to avoid losing custody, Trista entered a 10-day rehabilitation program and left the children in the care of her mother and sister. Isla and Raymond Jr. were her world, and she was determined not to lose them. By October 2011, Justin had seen Isla about 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista was taken into custody, on October 17, Justin and his family decided to take custody of Isla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DiPietro, contacted Child Protective Services and was approved to take Isla. The agency promptly notified Trista's relatives of the decision. However, Isla's aunt, Jessica, strongly disagreed with Child Protective Services' decision, accusing Justin of abusing Isla in the past and expressing concerns for the child's well-being. The officials argued that a father had more custody rights than an aunt. After being granted permission, Justin and his family went to pick up Isla, but they did not know the exact address. To resolve the issue, Child Protective officials provided the location through Officer Charles Weaver. Officer Charles accompanied Justin and his mother to Jessica's home, where Isla was staying with her aunt. While the grandmother waited in the car, Justin and Officer Charles approached the door. A dramatic scene ensued as Jessica pleaded with the police not to take Isla away, warning that she would not give up the child willingly. Despite the stress, police observed that Isla appeared to be very happy, constantly laughing, playing, and even trying to strike up a conversation. Trista's sister, Jessica, asked the police to observe how Isla's behavior changed when Justin arrived. When Justin approached, Isla immediately began crying and tried to get away from him. Despite her distress, the police handed Isla over to her father. Isla struggled and screamed, even trying to bite the police officer when she was placed in Justin's arms. Jessica explained to Officer Charles that Isla was extremely afraid of her father and that it was not in her best interest to take the child away from her family. Charles explained that if it were up to him, he would not let Isla go with Justin, but that it was not his decision and that he was there to enforce the directive from Child Services. In order to transfer custody, one option is to reach an agreement with the child's mother or seek the judge's approval through a court proceeding. However, in a recent custody exchange, neither of these steps were taken. Instead, the decision was made by the Child Protective Services supervisor. Unfortunately, the supervisor awarded custody to the child's father, Justin. Before the court grants sole custody to a parent, it typically conducts a thorough evaluation, including a background check and home visit. However, this did not occur in Isla's case. The primary consideration in custody decisions is the best interests of the child, but there are no records to support the decision made in Isla's case. Analysts say the only reason to remove a child from her maternal relatives is if the child is in imminent danger. If officials believed Isla was in danger, it is unclear why her younger brother, Raymond Jr., was not removed from the home. The father took her to his family home in Waterville. His 47-year-old mother, Phoebe, his 24-year-old sister, Alicia, and her young daughter, Gabriella, also lived there. Justin, the 25-year-old father, lived in the basement, a large, partially finished room, while the rest of the family lived upstairs. Trista called Justin every day during his rehabilitation to talk to Isla and make sure everything was okay. She did not notice anything unusual in these calls. On October 20, 2011, when Trista was on her 8th day of treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Isla's situation. Attendees included members of Child Protective Services, 2 doctors, Trista, her sister Jessica, an attorney, and Justin, who participated by phone. As a result of the discussion, an agreement was reached that Isla would be returned to Trista on October 22, 2011, after completing her addiction recovery program. It was also decided that Justin would take Isla to a treatment center on October 21 to visit her mother. Although things initially seemed to be going well for Trista, the situation soon took a turn for the worse, with no agreement being made and implemented. Trista desperately sought the help of Child Protective Services to enforce their original agreement, but her repeated calls were unsuccessful. So she proposed a temporary solution to Justin. He would continue to care for their daughter, and she would have regular visitation rights to Isla. However, on November 12, 2011, Justin took their daughter to the emergency room after she was injured. After conducting relevant tests, doctors determined that she had a broken arm. Justin told the doctor that the accident happened the night before, November 11th. It was raining, he said, and he slipped and fell on her while on the porch with Isla in his arms. He added that although the girl was crying, she did not appear to be injured, and it was not until the next morning that it became clear that she needed urgent medical attention. By the following Monday, the orthopedist said that surgery was not necessary and that the injury would heal on its own. A week later, on November 26th, at a third medical appointment to assess the child's progress, the specialist said everything was going according to plan. Trista was present at that medical appointment to closely monitor her daughter's recovery, never thinking that it would be the last time she would hold her. The mother's decision to seek custody of Isla marked a turning point. On December 15, 2011, she filed a petition with the court to begin the custody process due to ongoing disputes over visitation and communication with her daughter. Just 2 days later, on December 17, 2011, Justin contacted the police, reporting Isla missing from his mother's home, where he was staying with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and his sister Alicia. According to Justin, Isla had been put to bed the night before, but when they woke up, the 20-month-old was no longer there. That morning, Trista had gone to visit her husband Raymond at a correctional facility in a coastal Maine town near the Canadian border. Raymond was serving time for arson. Trista was in the passenger seat, asleep, while her father-in-law, Robert Fourier, drove. Robert receives a call from Trista's father with alarming news: Trista's child, Isla, is missing. Robert is momentarily stunned by the news, then finds a safe place to stop the car and wake Trista. Still half asleep, Trista hears her father's voice on the phone and tries to grasp the terrible news of her child's disappearance. Panicked, she immediately instructs Robert to change direction and go meet the police who are looking for Isla. Trista's hour-and-a-half journey feels like a century as she anxiously tries to contact Justin, growing increasingly frightened when he does not answer her calls. Upon arriving at the police station, Trista and her father-in-law, Robert, give their statements. 30 minutes later, Trista's father joins them. Justin called 911 at 8:49 a.m. that morning to report her missing, saying that Isla was last seen the night before at 10 p.m. by Justin's sister, Alicia, who had gone to check on Isla before going to bed. However, by Saturday morning, Isla had disappeared from her crib, with Justin not specifying the exact time she had gone missing in the call. Justin's theory was that Isla had been abducted by a stranger. As news of her disappearance quickly spread, the police quickly launched an investigation. In a statement to the media, the police chief assured that they were working diligently to find Isla at all costs. To aid in the search, the police thoroughly searched the house for any potential clues that could lead them to Isla. On the second day of the search, Sunday, December 18th, trained search dogs were brought in to assist. The area around the house where Isla was last seen was thoroughly searched and a detailed search was conducted at Trista's home. Due to the search, Trista had to temporarily stay in a motel with her mother and youngest son. By December 19th, the third day after the disappearance, the FBI was brought in to assist in the search. By this time, approximately 75 people from various agencies were involved in the investigation. State police had seized 2 vehicles from Justin's home, a 1996 Ford Explorer owned by Justin and a silver 4-door sedan owned by Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who had been present the night of the disappearance. The news quickly attracted local media attention, and in the days that followed, Trista appeared in several local media outlets, criticizing Justin and implying that he was responsible for the disappearance. As the news spread nationwide, Trista continued to express her concerns, saying that Justin, as the last person to see her daughter alive, was the only one who could answer her questions. Finally, Justin released a statement to the media on Wednesday, asserting that he knew nothing about Isla's disappearance and assuring the public that he and his family would cooperate fully with the investigation to ensure Isla's safe return. However, in his statement, Justin admitted that Isla was in his sole custody at the time of her disappearance. But he lied, saying this was achieved through an agreement with the mother. Furthermore, he added that Trista was incapable of caring for the child. As time went on, the search effort expanded. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, CARD, canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on every door. They contacted every household, returned to the area multiple times, and interviewed neighbors to gather vital information. With a team of 75 dedicated officers, the police demonstrated their unwavering commitment to solving the case. Within 10 days of Justin's initial report, police had spent approximately 5,000 hours searching and were actively pursuing 330 leads. A massive search effort for Isla involved approximately 50 civilian volunteers from a search and rescue association. In addition, a $30,000 reward was offered to anyone who could provide valuable information that could assist in finding Isla. Isla's devoted mother, Trista, played a key role in bringing the case to the forefront. She worked with the support group to organize numerous events, such as vigils and parades, to honor Isla's memory. Her persistence ensured that the case remained in the public eye, with news cameras continuing to cover the story. Trista, along with other spokespeople, provided reporters with updates to keep the story on the front page. Initially, police treating the case as a missing persons investigation rather than a homicide. However, began to change when police sealed off Justin's home and the surrounding area. Police also seized his car and made a major announcement, further altering the public's perception of the case at the direction of the head of the Criminal Prosecution Agency, who made a public announcement. The police officially ruled out the possibility that Isla had run away on her own. On the 13th day of the investigation, the sheriff transferred the case to the state police's Major Crimes Unit. In this announcement, a difficult reality was revealed. The case had been moved from a missing persons investigation to a criminal investigation. In the early days, Justin kept a low profile and avoided the media, but over time, he began to appear more frequently. In one of his interviews on the Today Show, he addressed the change in the law enforcement message, asserting that Isla had been kidnapped and begging the person who kidnapped her to bring her home. He stated that he went on the show to approach whoever kidnapped his daughter and tell them that their actions were wrong. He stressed that they had no right to make such a decision because they were not her father and stressed that Isla needed to stay home with her family. When asked about his previous silence, Justin admitted that he had refrained from speaking out because he initially thought Isla would return. He said that the police had advised him to stay away from the media, a part confirmed by a Department of Public Safety spokesperson. The spokesperson clarified that this advice was only given initially, and that the police had later encouraged Isla's parents to make more public appearances. Justin addressed the allegations against him directly. He invited the TV host to spend a day with him to see firsthand what he was going through. He expressed his appreciation for the police's efforts. Justin stressed that the truth remains the same, no matter how many times someone may be accused or called a liar. He believes that the truth is patient and will eventually come out. In late January, police announced that Isla's blood had been found in several locations in Justin's home. They also indicated that, although there was not enough evidence to make an arrest, Justin, Courtney, and Alicia, the three adults who lived in the home where Isla was last seen, were considered suspects. Stephen McCausland, a spokesman for the Department of Public Safety, stated that the family's account of the events was not supported by any forensic evidence, dismissing the possibility that someone had broken into Isla's bedroom undetected and taken her while the three adults were in the home. 6 months after Isla was reported missing. On May 30, 2012, police stated that there was no possibility that she was still alive. Trista's family allowed reporters into their home for a press conference announcing the news. Upon hearing the news, Trista immediately burst into tears, which quickly turned to anger as she accused Justin of killing her daughter. For Trista's family, learning the details of the forensic tests conducted at Justin's home was extremely difficult. They knew that Isla's blood had been found and that the amount of blood represented 25% of her total blood volume. However, they never saw the evidence until January 2013, when everything that had been discovered was revealed to them. Justin's 1996 Ford Explorer had a child seat in the back, where Isla's blood was found on the left shoulder strap. Dried vomit was also found in the back seat. In the girl's bedroom, police discovered blood on her princess pink sneakers, which were on the floor next to her crib, as well as on the face and arms of her doll. They believe she may have tried to clean the blood from her mouth with her toy. A blood stain was also found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood was found in a basement, where a pool of Isla's blood was found in the middle of the mattress Justin shared with Courtney. In addition, vomit and a pink strand that looked like the hair of a toy were found on the bed. Justin's sneakers, which had Isla's blood on the tongue and inside, were found next to the bed. There were also blood stains on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls, which corresponded to Isla's height. An expert determined that some of the blood drops were the size of a dime, indicating blunt force trauma. Furthermore, experts pointed out that some of the blood spatter in the house could have been caused by Isla's coughing, suggesting that she had suffered both internal and external injuries. Police said that they had used bed sheets to clean up Isla's blood. This was a horrifying revelation for Trista and her family, and they still had many more disturbing details to learn. Luminol tests conducted in the house revealed traces of blood that were not visible to the naked eye. The photo slides from the house left Trista deeply distressed. She panicked and left the police station, now more convinced than ever that her daughter, Isla, had been murdered. The police wanted to show her more photos, but she refused, saying she had seen enough. Months earlier, when the police presented the same photographic evidence, he showed no reaction. The police also tried to show Justin's family the photos. They refused. They were not interested. Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who was with him the night Isla disappeared, reacted in a similar way. Overwhelmed and helpless, Trista told the press that Justin, Alicia, and Courtney were still walking down the street as if nothing had happened. 8 months after receiving a critical report in September 2013, Trista decided to write a letter to the press about the evidence and photos she had seen. She was frustrated by the slow progress and wanted to rekindle public interest in the case. In the spring of 2016, a group of journalists went to Justin's mother's house. His younger sister, Alicia, answered the door and was asked about the journalist who asked about the blood evidence. She mentioned that Isla was lactose intolerant and had been throwing up. However, a quick online search revealed that common symptoms of lactose intolerance include gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. While nausea and vomiting can occur, they are not the most typical symptoms, let alone vomiting blood. In 2017, at Trista's request, a judge officially declared Isla dead, determining that her death occurred on or about December 17, 2011, when her father, Justin, reported her missing. With this declaration, Trista and her attorney filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin, claiming he caused Isla's death through intentional unlawful acts and caused her pain and suffering before her death, including fear, terror, and physical injury. At the time of the lawsuit, Isla was still missing, and Justin, along with his attorney, denied any wrongdoing, describing the lawsuit as baseless. In response, Trista held a press conference where she addressed Justin directly, questioning whether he had a conscience. She said, "I could see it in your eyes, and you knew it was a problem. You looked at me, and I knew you cared." In early 2023, a judge granted Trista's request to add his mother, Phoebe, and his sister, Alicia, to the wrongful death lawsuit. The 3 defendants are now facing civil charges of wrongful death, intentional infliction of pain and suffering, and unlawful interference with the body of a deceased person. Additionally, Justin faces charges of failing to fulfill his parental duty of care to a minor child. Trista and her attorney understand that they will not receive any financial compensation from Justin. That is not the purpose of the lawsuit. Their purpose is to learn the truth behind Isla's disappearance. There are many strange things about Isla's disappearance. The police informed Trista of a shocking detail. On the morning Isla went missing, Justin drove to Portland and back before calling 911. He claimed that he thought Trista had kidnapped Isla and was looking for Trista, but he never contacted her or any of her family members. Instead, during that long drive, he called a friend who had sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy on Isla just weeks earlier. Adding to the strangeness, Justin stayed at this friend's house while the police were investigating the case. This was surprising, especially since he had been absent from his daughter's life for 9 months of Trista's pregnancy and for most of Isla's life. Trista also shared that she had received strange text messages from Justin in the week after Isla went missing. He expressed fears that someone might try to kidnap Isla. The last time he mentioned someone trying to kidnap her was on December 11th, just 6 days before Isla was reported missing. After her disappearance, his messages became threatening and cryptic, leaving Trista wondering what he really meant. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Anna Walshe. Anna Walshe was born on April 18, 1983, in Belgrade, Serbia. She grew up in a cultured family alongside her younger sister. Anna attended the 5th Belgrade Gymnasium, where she distinguished herself as an outstanding student. She then pursued higher education at Belgrade Research University, the oldest and largest university in Serbia, focusing on foreign languages. She earned a master's degree in French language and literature. At 22, Anna graduated and decided to explore new opportunities in the United States, with her family's full support. In 2005, she began her American journey and settled in the U.S. with the goal of advancing her education in hospitality management. She took on administrative positions at renowned hotels, including the Inn at Little Washington in Virginia, which is part of the prestigious Relais and Chateaux collection. Anna's friendly nature, approachability, and strong sense of responsibility helped her quickly rise in her career, earning the respect of her colleagues and managers. Anna was multilingual and skilled at resolving conflicts, which helped her easily connect with others. She was well liked by her colleagues and had a group of friends. Anna took every opportunity to shine in her career. She became a U.S. citizen while keeping her Serbian nationality, earned a high income, and invested in her own home and car. Her travels expanded her perspective, and she was promoted to senior manager. Known for her intelligence, beauty, slender figure, and bright smile, Anna attracted many admirers during her time at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts. There, she fell in love with Marcus O'Neill, the hotel's head chef, and they got married in 2009, with Anna adopting his last name. After got married with Marcus, Anna's life takes a turn when she meets Brian Walshe. Brian Walshe, born in July 1975 in Boston, Massachusetts, comes from a prominent and wealthy family. In his younger days, he would often borrow money from friends without paying them back. While in college, he would treat friends to meals at expensive restaurants, but would use various tricks to make sure they ended up paying for him. For years, Brian was estranged from his father, Dr. Thomas Walshe, and this distance continued until Thomas passed away in 2018. Their troubled relationship began when Brian deceitfully withdrew nearly $1 million from his father's personal account and vanished with the money. The father did not report his son to the police and even tried to convince him to return the stolen money. When Brian refused, Thomas cut off all communication with him. At the time of this serious theft, Brian's parents had been divorced for a long time, and his father had started a new family. Thomas decided to completely remove his eldest son from his life and his will. However, after Thomas passed away, Brian quickly asserted his claim and filed a lawsuit, alleging that the will was forged by Thomas' widow and younger children to deny him his rightful inheritance. Unfortunately, he could not provide any evidence to support his claims and did not receive any part of the estate. Many people who knew Brian described him as greedy, malicious, and very cruel. He often resorted to violence and struggled to control his emotions. He would get what he wanted using force, and when he was angry, he became a threat to others. Reports indicate that in the late 2000s, Brian received treatment at a psychiatric clinic to manage his anger, during which he was officially diagnosed with sociopathy. In 2014, a unique love story began when Anna met Brian, a hotel guest. At the time, Anna was married to Marcus O'Neill, who also worked at the hotel. Despite Anna's marriage, Brian was immediately attracted to her and began to pursue her with increasing intensity. Used to getting what he wanted and unwilling to accept rejection, he relentlessly sought Anna's attention. He eventually obtained her phone number and home address, where she lived with her husband, creating a troubling situation for all involved. In 2015, the O'Neill family had to involve the police due to Brian's relentless harassment, which occurred around the clock. He repeatedly pursued Anna, calling her at work, texting her personal phone, and insisting that she divorce her husband to be with him. The situation intensified when Brian threatened to harm Anna and her husband if she did not leave with him. The details that followed are unclear, particularly why Anna ultimately changed her mind. However, a year after, she surprisingly divorced her husband. A few months later, Brian became her second husband. The newlyweds moved into a luxurious home in Casson, Massachusetts, which is about 20 miles southeast of Boston, in a well-off neighborhood. They had 3 sons in quick succession, with the boys being born a couple of years apart. Anna chose not to take maternity leave and successfully balanced her job with being a mother, continuing to advance in her career. She became the regional general manager at Tishman Speyer, a real estate company, where she earned a high salary and became the primary breadwinner for the family. Since her job often required travel to Washington, D.C., she bought another home there in her name, where she stayed during business trips. During these trips, she relied on visiting nannies to help care for her children. What was Brian doing while his wife was busy expanding their family and advancing her career? Brian was unemployed. The $1 million he had once received from his father was running out, and everything his wife earned was carefully registered in her name. Brian was looking for easy ways to make money. Before marrying Anna, he had spent some time in South Korea, where he became friends with a wealthy people whose family owned an impressive art collection. After returning to the United States, Brian kept in touch with this friend, who unexpectedly asked for his help in selling several paintings by the famous artist Andy Warhol. Brian eagerly agreed but chose not only to sell the artworks for a commission, he wanted to profit from the transaction. He had a collection of abstract paintings by a renowned artist, titled Shadow. Brian assessed each painting and gathered the required documentation, including authenticity certificates. He then decided to create copies of both the paintings and the documentation. To do this, he contacted artists who could produce precise replicas of the paintings. Brian convinced the artists that he needed these copies as backups, since each original painting was valued at approximately $250,000. For several years, Brian successfully created and sold fake paintings as if they were originals to collectors from different countries. His scheme came to an end when one of his buyers, an art expert who specializes in Andy Warhol, quickly recognized forgery and took legal action against him. The FBI then launched an investigation, and in April 2021, he pleaded guilty to selling counterfeit art. As part of a deal negotiated by his lawyer, he was placed under house arrest instead of serving time in prison, on the condition that he return the money earned from the sale of the fake paintings to the buyers. Although Brian's movements were heavily restricted, he could leave his house twice a day to drop off and pick up his children from school. He also had 2.5 hours each morning to visit a limited number of approved places nearby, such as stores, pharmacies, and dry cleaners, to buy essential items. On December 31, 2022, the Walshe family was getting ready to celebrate New Year's Eve at home. Only Anna, Brian, and their 3 young sons were present. Because of their age, the boys went to bed early, leaving Anna and Brian at the dinner table. That day, Anna shared her last social media post, where she sent New Year's greetings and mentioned that the past year had been tough, but she and Brian were still together. Anna was supposed to fly to Washington, D.C. for work on January 3rd. However, when she didn't show up for work on January 4th and missed an important deal, her boss, Tishman Speyer, reported her missing to the police. Her phone had also been unreachable for several days. Brian also reported her missing, expressing concern that he had not been able to contact her for several days. According to Brian, he last saw Anna on January 1st. He claimed that she had woken him up early in the morning, saying there were some issues at work and that her boss had asked her to come in earlier than planned. He then believed that his wife had gone to the airport with only a few belongings. However, inconsistencies in the case soon emerged. First, Anna had not purchased, changed, or booked a flight on January 1st, nor had she canceled a flight scheduled for January 3rd. Second, she had not shown up at the airport on either January 1st or January 3rd. Third, how had she left the house? Her personal car was still in the garage, and she had not called a taxi. Brian suggested that she may have hitchhiked, but this theory was not convincing. Brian's statements and behavior raised many questions. His accounts were inconsistent, and he did not seem particularly interested in what was going on. Unable to contact Anna for more than 3 days, he only reported her missing on the 4th day, and only after her workplace called. Brian was considered the prime suspect from the start. However, law enforcement did not have sufficient grounds to arrest him or obtain a search warrant for his family home. They conducted only a cursory search with his permission, but nothing came of it. Brian maintained that he had lived a normal life during those 3 days, visiting shops regularly and doing housework. However, verifying his claims proved difficult. Each time he left the house, he forgot his phone, which he said was often taken away by his older children to play games without permission. On January 5th, police issued a public appeal on television, showing a photo of Anna and asking anyone with information about her whereabouts or fate to contact law enforcement immediately. However, no witnesses came forward. Anna was known to have called her mother and sister one last time on December 31st, making her husband the last person known to have seen her. Surveillance footage from the neighborhood provided no clues. Anna was not captured on any cameras on the morning of January 1st, as if she had never left the house. Her husband, on the other hand, was recorded leaving and returning multiple times, but his destination could not be determined. His claims of a trip to the grocery store were dismissed. His car was not seen in any footage of the route, nor was it spotted in the store. It wasn't until January 8 that Brian was arrested for perjury and taken to the police station for questioning while his home was finally searched. It was discovered that on January 1st, he had visited a hardware store in another area, not on the list of approved places he could visit while under house arrest. There, he spent nearly $500 on a large amount of cleaning supplies, plastic sheeting, duct tape, a mop with a bucket, and utility rags. He paid in cash, perhaps hoping his visit would go unnoticed. The initial search of the family home turned up nothing unusual or suspicious. Everything was in its place, and there were no signs of a struggle or traces of blood. However, when law enforcement descended into the basement, there was no doubt. It was the scene of a gruesome crime. Blood was everywhere, and hidden among the old furniture was a bloody knife and saw wrapped in towels. Brian had previously admitted that on January 3rd, he had visited his mother's house on the other side of town. He claimed that he had violated the terms of his house arrest because his mother needed help with housework due to her poor health. But after the grisly discoveries in the basement, police suspected that along the way, the man may have disposed of evidence or some of his deceased wife's body parts. All the trash cans in the area where he and his wife lived, as well as along the route to his mother's house, were checked. These searches were fruitful, and in one of them, a kitchen axe with traces of dried blood and several bloody towels similar to those found in basement were discovered. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood on the towels, knives, axes, and saws in the basement was that of the missing Anna, clearing any remaining doubts about her death. The search history on a laptop and a tablet seized from his home shows disturbing intentions. In the weeks leading up to his wife's disappearance, Brian searched the internet for information about the best states for divorce based on property division. He also looked into whether he could claim ownership of a second home in Washington, D.C. that belonged solely to Anna. This raises suspicions about his motives. At around 4 a.m. on January 1st, the first search made on the tablet was, "How long does it take for a body to start decomposing?" This search was followed by nearly 20 additional queries related to body disposal, such as how to clean up blood, how to dismember a body, whether a body could be identified without teeth, how long DNA can last, and if someone could be charged with a crime if the body was never discovered. All of these searches were conducted on the tablet belonging to his young child, who is the offspring of the woman he brutally harmed. By January 3rd, Brian was already looking up how and when someone can inherit property from a missing person. He seemed confident he could avoid punishment and was preparing to claim the inheritance. On January 18th, he was formally charged with his wife's murder, even though her body had not been found. Prosecutors believe that on the night of January 1st, Brian either deliberately or accidentally killed his wife. They suspect he then dismembered her body in their basement and placed the parts in plastic bags, disposing of them in trash bins around the city over the next few days. The area surrounding the Brian residence and within a few kilometers was carefully searched for evidence. Nearby wastelands, forests, and bodies of water were also investigated, but no findings were made. The defendant pleaded not guilty and did not reveal what he did with the body. Furthermore, it was disclosed that Anna had been feeling unhappy recently and had contemplated divorcing her husband. She expressed this concern multiple times during phone calls with her mother and sister. The day before her disappearance, she called her mother, asking her to fly from Serbia for a few days. However, her mother did not take her daughter seriously and decided to postpone the visit. Brian Walshe's trial is currently ongoing, and he is being held at the Norfolk Correctional Facility, waiting for his next court date. Anna's mother has been monitoring the investigation from Serbia, as she has not traveled to the United States. The Serbian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has reached out to the consulate in New York, which is coordinating with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office to ensure that Anna's mother receives timely updates about the investigation in court hearings. The 3 sons of the Walshe family are currently in state custody. Brian's family members do not want to care for them, mainly due to Anna's mother's age and health issues. Additionally, Anna's sister, who lives in Canada, has also refused to take in her nephews. The only person willing to take the boys is Anna's close friend, Pamela Bond, who prefers to care for them herself rather than see them separated and placed in different foster homes. As the investigation progresses and Brian Walshe's trial continues, it highlights the need to be aware of our relationships and the serious harm that can result from betrayal and deceit. While we do not yet know the final outcome for Brian Walshe, including whether he will face punishment or if Anna's body will ever be discovered, we will always remember Anna as a kind and loving person. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Inman family. William Inman and Sandra's story began in 1983 when they met at church. He was 18 and she was 16. With their parents' approval, they quickly got married and moved to Logan, Ohio. William was a devoted religious man who worked as a builder. In his free time, he volunteered at the Evangelical Church of the Tabernacle of Faith near Nelsonville, where he played musical instruments. Meanwhile, Sandra, as a housewife, supported her husband's spiritual activities. In 1984, the couple had their first child, a son named William Jr. To prevent any confusion, the church community referred to the father as Bill and the son as Will. Over the years, Will grew up. In 2001, at the age of 17, he met 15-year-old Summer Cook at a church service. Their meeting was strikingly similar to the love story of Bill and Sandra. The young couple dated for 3 years, and in 2004, after Summer turned 18, they got married. They quickly settled into Will's parents' large house in Logan. In the same year, 39-year-old Bill Inman declared himself a spiritual leader and turned his garage into a temporary church, where he started holding services. Although local residents were initially skeptical of him as a self-proclaimed pastor, his church began to gather followers. It started with neighbors and gradually expanded to their acquaintances. People were drawn there to pray, seek comfort, and make donations. In 2005, Will and Summer joyfully welcomed a son named Alex. However, they soon encountered financial challenges. Will's work at the church did not provide enough income, so the family chose to seek better opportunities in another state. In 2006, the Inman family relocated to Florida. They soon found jobs in the construction industry, building hotels in their new location. Meanwhile, Sandra and Summer looked after their home and raised little Alex. After 2 years, however, they missed their hometown and decided to return to Ohio. Unfortunately, they had lost the right to repurchase their previous house in Logan while they were away, so they had to rent a different place in rural Vinton. In 2008, shortly after returning, Will and Summer welcomed their second child, a daughter named Kale. 2 years later, they had their third child, another daughter named Alana. Despite the difficulties of raising young children, Will and Summer made an effort to carve out time for themselves. Almost every weekend, they entrusted their kids to Bill and Sandra, who happily embraced their roles as grandparents. For this elderly couple, their grandchildren brought immense joy and purpose to their lives. In the spring of 2010, Bill Inman was officially appointed as a pastor of the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith. Alongside his wife, he established a charitable organization named Ranch of Mercy, which was created to assist those in need, particularly people who had lost their jobs or homes. Bill had a vision of constructing a large shelter for orphans and widows, intending to build it himself. Unfortunately, he faced challenges due to insufficient funding to make this dream a reality. Bill proposed holding a lottery to raise funds. He planned to sell tickets for $10 each to reach his financial goal. The winner will receive either a new house or $200,000. Bill also promised to give away 99 other valuable prizes in a raffle. Information about the lottery was shared through local media and advertising. Bill went door to door, encouraging people to support the cause by buying tickets, assuring them that the money raised would be used to build a shelter for those in need. In total, Inman sold 100,000 tickets and raised $1 million. The prize draw is set for September 2010. While Bill was busy with charity work, issues were developing in the Inman family. In June 2010, Summer informed her husband that she wanted a divorce after 6 years of marriage. Before this conversation, she had written a painful entry in her diary, expressing that she was very tired of trying to please everyone and felt exhausted. She questioned whether she deserved happiness and if she had the right to fall in love again and feel loved in return. She acknowledged that it might not be the best time, but she felt the need to tell Will the truth, believing he deserved to know that she did not want to be with him anymore. She mentioned that she needed time alone to figure out who she really was, as she felt like she was just following orders at that moment. Summer emphasized her love for her children, stating that she wouldn't trade them for the world, but she did not want them to see their mother merely obeying someone else. She expressed uncertainty about how Will would react, fearing that he might get angry, try to take the kids, or even threaten her. She believed they should share equal time with the children, but she knew his parents would oppose this and try to persuade her to stay, although she realized that wouldn't change anything. She also recounted that yesterday, Will had asked her what she wanted, but she couldn't answer because all she knew was what she didn't want, to be unhappy and feel trapped. Yet, she remained silent every day, saying that all she could do was cry and sleep. She admitted that she just didn't know how to escape the situation and make everything right, hoping that when she wrote again, she would have found the answer. Summer filed for divorce and moved out of the Inman's house with the children and essential belongings to her parents' home. She wanted to ensure that Alex, Cale, and Alana could still communicate with their father, so she allowed them to visit Will and his parents. 2 months after leaving her husband, Summer began a relationship with Adam Peters. At the same time, she took a job as a cleaner at a bank in downtown Logan, as she had no formal education and struggled to find other employment. Meanwhile, September and October passed, but the drawing that Bill from Ranch of Mercy had promised never took place. It also became clear that construction on the prize house hadn't even started, and the Bill family was slow to refund people's money for the tickets. In early December 2010, the Inmans received notice that they needed to leave their rented home due to unpaid debts. After this news, Summer, accompanied by Adam, went to collect their belongings. However, Will and his parents refused to let her in. Summer called the police, claiming that Will was threatening her and wouldn't return her personal items. When officers arrived, Will continued to deny entry. He threatened to shoot Adam, and even got into a confrontation with a police officer. In her statement, Summer explained that before their wedding, she and Will appeared to have a perfect relationship, but everything changed after they married. Will became controlling and jealous, making unfounded accusations. He dictated her actions and invaded her privacy, affecting her eating habits, household responsibilities, and even their sexual relationship. Summer was so restricted that she couldn't sleep without his permission. He essentially kept her confined to the house and took away her phone and keys. She revealed that Will had always wanted to have 12 children with her and had even considered marrying a second wife. He frequently visited websites for polygamous families, where he shared explicit photos. Will also threatened to kill Summer if she tried to leave him. At one point, he took her cherished cats, drove them far away, and then lied, saying they had escaped through an open window, laughing and claiming she would never see them again. After Summer accused him of wrongdoing, Will attempted to defend his actions by saying he took her phone and keys because he thought she was being unfaithful. Regarding the cats, he claimed he took them to a shelter because they were scratching the furniture and being aggressive to family members. Eventually, Will was ordered to stay away from Summer, and he received a fine and probation for his actions. A custody battle began between the two families. The Inmans reported to the police that Adam Peters posed a danger to Alex, Kaylee, and Alana. A frightening incident occurred late on the night of March 22, 2011. 25-year-old Summer was finishing her shift at the bank. As usual, she cleaned up her workspace and went outside around 11 p.m. to take out the trash. Before leaving, Summer had sent a message to Adam, whom she was supposed to meet after work, but he never saw her again. Concerned, Adam went to the bank after midnight. He couldn't find Summer, but near the trash can he discovered her belongings, her phone, keys, and a running music player with headphones on. A little further away, he found her jacket in the bushes. Adam called the police and notified Summer's parents about her disappearance. Initially, the family thought that she might have been late from work or misplaced her belongings. However, the bank security service informed them that she hadn't been seen since her shift ended. When the police arrived, several witnesses were already present. 2 women jogging nearby reported that they had seen Summer being kidnapped about an hour earlier. They explained that as Summer approached a dumpster, a Ford Crown Victoria, driven by a blonde woman, pulled up. Two men wearing black balaclavas exited the vehicle, grabbed Summer, and forced her into the back seat. Despite her attempts to resist, scream, and plead for help, one of the witnesses who tried to intervene was met with pepper spray from the female driver. The kidnappers then drove away with Summer. The two women rushed to the nearest police station to report the incident, but for some reason, law enforcement was skeptical and even suspicious of their account, suspecting they might have fabricated the story for amusement. A whole hour had passed after Summer's parents called the police before they finally arrived at the crime scene. Unfortunately, by that time, it was too late for them to find Summer while the trail was still fresh. News of the abduction of 25-year-old Summer Inman quickly spread through local media. Hundreds of residents of Logan joined the search effort, but as days went by, hope of finding her alive began to fade. Summer's parents struggled to keep their thoughts away from the worst possible outcome. A few weeks prior to the tragedy, Summer had posted a picture on Facebook with Adam and the children, depicting what appeared to be a happy family. This photo infuriated Will Inman, Summer's husband. It had been revealed that Summer met Adam before deciding to divorce Will. In the spring of 2010, Adam started working for the Inmans, maintaining their house and yard, and he soon developed feelings for Summer. Initially, she rejected his advances, but eventually, she gave in. In her diary, she reflected on that moment, expressing that when their eyes met, she realized she had let the devil take hold of her and ignored the warnings from God. She mentioned that she tried to walk away, with her mind screaming to run, but she stayed and allowed Adam to embrace her, expressing her regret and guilt. Meeting Adam marked the beginning of the end for Summer and Will's marriage, as she realized that she wanted to pursue happiness, love, and to be loved, which ultimately led her to file for divorce. 5 days before Summer disappeared, Will attempted to challenge the alimony payments in court. He wanted to reduce the amount he had to pay his ex-wife from $150 per child each month to $50, as his annual income was only $6,500. Will, along with his parents, sought sole custody of the children, but the judge denied their request. Bill and Sandra deeply missed their grandchildren, who were the center of their lives. Since separating from Summer, the elderly couple had visibly lost weight and appeared weary. In March 2011, shortly after Summer went missing, the police found the Inman family, Bill, Sandra, and Will, were hiding in Bill's mother's house in Jackson County, Ohio. During questioning, all three of them consistently denied any involvement in Summer's disappearance. They explained that on the night she vanished, they had traveled to Cleveland to look at a new house. However, their car broke down, and they spent the entire night trying to fix it on the side of the road. They returned home to Logan the following morning. The Inmans stated that they had always treated Summer well and rarely had conflicts with her. However, they noted that after Adam Peters came into their lives, things took a turn for the worse. Bill, Sandra, and Will described Adam as a negative influence who had ruined their previously happy family. The police took an interest in a white Ford Crown Victoria that was parked near the Inman's house. They seized the car's GPS navigator and examined its route. They discovered that on the afternoon of March 22nd, when the kidnapping took place, the car was in Logan. The GPS was turned off at 5:30 p.m. that evening and only activated again the following morning, March 23rd, still in Logan. There was no evidence that the Inman family ever came to Cleveland. Additionally, phone records indicated that the suspects remained in Logan throughout the night from March 22nd to March 23rd. On the morning of March 23rd at 7:30 a.m., Bill, Sandra, and Will were seen at a car wash, where they had the car thoroughly cleaned inside. Summer was not with them. Afterward, the Inmans traveled to Cleveland, where they changed the tires at an auto repair shop. The mechanic found it unusual that Bill chose to replace nearly new tires with older ones. Additionally, the Inmans attempted to alter the car's appearance, and Bill removed a spotlight that he had previously installed near the side mirror. After the arrest, Bill attempted to reassure his elderly mother that they were innocent and that the trials they faced were a form of divine punishment. However, after several hours of intense questioning and realizing that all three could face the death penalty, Sandra eventually broke down. She confessed that they were responsible for the kidnapping of Summer on that tragic night. The men wearing balaclavas were identified as her husband, Bill, and her son, Will. Sandra explained that the abduction was entirely her idea. She intended to scare her daughter-in-law into allowing Will to see their children, but things quickly spiraled out of control. She stated that Will would admit to guilt for both murder and kidnapping. Sandra acknowledged that it was her idea to take Summer, explaining that she believed this would frighten her. Will tied Summer's hands, feet, and neck with plastic ties. Summer struggled and screamed, but then suddenly lost consciousness. Upon noticing that she was unresponsive, Will panicked and wanted to cut her free. He called out to his mother, asking where the knife was because he couldn't find it. As the family desperately searched for the knife, precious minutes passed. It was too late, and Summer had suffocated. Sandra insisted that they never intended to harm their daughter-in-law. Their goal was simply to scare her in order to resolve a custody dispute over the grandchildren so they could see them on weekends. On March 29, 2011, 1 week after the abduction, Sandra revealed the location where they had hidden the body. Summer was placed in an abandoned well on the property of the church that the Inman family attended, known as the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith, which is situated near Nelsonville, 30 kilometers from the bank where Summer worked. Bill Inman had previously helped build this church, and 28 years ago, he and Sandra got married there under its arches. When the police removed the concrete lid from the well, they discovered a disturbing scene. Summer was at the bottom, her body positioned head first. She was dressed in the same outfit she had worn on her last day, a black t-shirt that read, "I don't have an anger problem, I have an idiot problem." The autopsy revealed that Summer had died from strangulation. Besides the marks left by plastic ties on her neck, wrists, and ankles, there were no other injuries on her body. Sandra originally intended to dispose of the body in the river. However, she later thought the church well would be a safer place where it wouldn't be discovered. She confessed to her crime and showed genuine remorse for her actions. The trial soon followed. Bill, 49, and Will, 28, both pleaded not guilty to Summer's murder. Throughout the hearings, they spoke very little and avoided making eye contact with her parents. In contrast, Sandra took full responsibility for the crime, reiterating that the abduction was her idea. As she delivered her final statement, the woman tearfully pleaded for forgiveness from Summer's parents. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sandra clearly expressed her deep regret for the tragic events. "Summer was like a daughter to me," she cried. "If I could turn back time, I would never have made this terrible choice." In 2012, the court sentenced Bill and Will Inman to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sandra received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 15 years. The church friends and parishioners all agreed that Bill was the one controlling everything in the Inman family. He made all the decisions. No one thought that the idea of the kidnapping came from Sandra. It was well known that Will had been spoiled as a child, with his parents giving in to his every demand. Sandra realized that both her husband and son were as guilty as she was, but she continued to plead guilty, hoping that it would lessen the consequences for them. Alex, Cale, and Alana were cared for by the parents of Summer, who had passed away, for an extended period. They struggled to explain to their grandchildren the absence of their mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather. The tragic story of the Inman family highlights how concealed anger, jealousy, and a need to control others can result in devastating outcomes. Bill and Sandra, who appeared to embody piety and strong family values to everyone, revealed themselves to be oppressive figures to their daughter-in-law. Summer found herself trapped in a toxic relationship that stifled her will and desires. Her efforts to escape ultimately cost her life. Will, who was raised in this oppressive environment, became selfish and resistant to compromise. His obsession with reclaiming his wife and children at any price ultimately led to his downfall. The terrible crime committed by the Inman's family shattered multiple families, leaving 3 young children without their mother and a grandfather and grandmother without their beloved family member. This story highlights the importance of letting go of grudges, respecting others' boundaries, and building relationships based on trust and respect. Holding on to anger can eventually lead to outbursts that damage the most valuable aspects of our lives. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Emily Longley. Emily Longley was born in England in 1994 to parents Mark and Caroline Longley. 2 years later, she welcomed her younger sister, Hannah. The sisters enjoyed a close relationship while growing up in a loving family. When Emily was 9 and Hannah was 7, the family relocated to Auckland, New Zealand. Unfortunately, after Emily began associating with the wrong crowd, her parents chose to send her back to the UK to live with her grandparents and start anew. In 2010, Emily traveled to England to study at Brockenhurst College. Her goal was to earn a business degree, and she aspired to be a model. While in England, she stayed at her grandparents' house in Bournemouth, a popular resort town located on the coast of the English Channel, near Poole. At the time of her move, Emily's sister Hannah was still in school. Their parents, Mark and Caroline, had divorced but continued to have a friendly relationship. Emily was a beautiful young woman who drew a lot of attention. One day, she met 20-year-old Elliot Turner, and he left a lasting impression on her. Over time, their communication developed into a romantic relationship. In April 2011, Emily traveled back to New Zealand to visit her family, whom she hadn't seen in 6 months. Her father greeted her at the airport, and she rushed to him, hugging him tightly and expressing how much she missed him. Emily shared that she had a very close bond with her father, who adored her and missed her smile, laughter, and playful jokes. The next day, the entire family visited Emily's favorite pizzeria. She shared with her parents that, in addition to her college studies, she was involved in modeling and had made some amazing friends. She also talked about her boyfriend, 20-year-old Elliot. Although they had only been dating for a few months, Emily felt she was too young for a serious relationship. "I think I'm going to break up with him when I return," she said. Over the following weeks, Emily enjoyed spending time with friends and family, creating great memories. No one realized that they would soon lose her. When Emily's flight began boarding, she found it difficult to say goodbye to her family. She promised them she would return in 5 months. During that time, she was excited to watch the Rugby World Cup starting on September 9th. A few days later, while texting her father, Emily mentioned that she had broken up with Elliot, but she chose not to share specific details. Elliot had been acting oddly after seeing photos Emily posted on social media from New Zealand, particularly because there were other guys in the pictures, which made him very jealous. Elliot Turner, a 20-year-old from a wealthy jewelry family, appeared to live a carefree life. He was well known in the bar and club scenes of Bournemouth and Poole and was part of a group of affluent young men known as the Firm. His friends nicknamed him All Talk Turner due to his tendency to brag. In December 2010, he met Emily, and they enjoyed a lavish lifestyle together, often staying out late. However, Elliot, who had a history of being obsessed with women, quickly became jealous, leading to frequent violent arguments in their relationship. People described him as threatening, aggressive, controlling, and possessive. In January 2008, when Elliot was 16 years old, the police sent him a warning letter about harassment. They advised him not to contact his ex-girlfriend after he inundated her with text messages and emails following their breakup. Elliot enjoyed being the center of attention and did not have to work since his parents financially supported him. He was skilled at manipulating others, including his parents, and his life centered on parties, women, alcohol, and drugs. He believed he was capable of doing anything he desired. Elliot always carries a hammer with him to intimidate anyone who might challenge him. His friends thought Elliot fancied himself a gangster. Elliot would often buy drinks for everyone at the bar. Elliot liked to brag about owning a new Mini Cooper, but it was actually a gift from his grandmother. He attempted to maintain his tough guy persona by posting streetwise messages on social media, where he often called himself Scarface or God. Although he attracted a lot of female attention, he became very attached to Emily when he met her. She praised his image as a successful person, something he worked hard to achieve. As their relationship progressed, Elliot began to display increasingly controlling behavior. He even threatened Emily, saying he would take her life. Emily wrote an emotional note to Elliot expressing her feelings. 1. I love you. 2. Please don't say you'll kill me. 3. Stop bringing up your ex-girlfriends. 4. Stop being so aggressive. Relax a bit, because that is much more attractive, and you scare me because you're so intimidating. As Elliot revealed his true nature and his controlling behavior escalated to an unacceptable level, Emily understood that he was not the right person for her. Then she decided to break up with him. Unfortunately, individuals like Elliot often cannot accept rejection. On the evening of May 6, 2011, Emily was out with friends at an entertainment venue. Surveillance footage showed her arriving at the nightclub with them. In another development, Elliot checked Emily's Facebook messages and found out she was seeing another man, which made him extremely angry. He went to the club and confronted Emily, leading to an argument. The situation escalated when Emily threw her drink at him. Elliot reacted by verbally abusing her and making threats of violence. He disapproved of Emily's outfit, claiming it was too revealing, and ignored the fact that they had broken up. Unwilling to accept the breakup, he continued to follow her after she decided to leave. His friends heard him say that he would kill her, that he would go to prison for it and still be a millionaire, and that serving 10 years in prison wouldn't bother him. Elliot convinced Emily to come to his house, saying he wanted to talk more relaxed. Elliot lived with his parents, which may have made Emily feel more at ease, thinking he would behave better around them. Neighbors observed them entering the house. The next morning, Anita Turner, Elliot's mother, called emergency services, reporting that Emily was unresponsive. The ambulance arrived around 9 a.m. Anita followed the nurse's instructions to help Emily, but unfortunately, when the paramedics arrived, they could only confirm Emily Longley had died. Anita, an Indonesian citizen, moved to the UK to marry Lee Turner. When they had a son, they gave him everything he wanted, which turned out to be a serious mistake. During a call with emergency services, Anita seemed surprisingly calm for a mother who had just discovered her son's girlfriend dead. Her demeanor was unsettlingly normal. Meanwhile, in New Zealand, Emily's father, Mark, woke up at 2 a.m. to find numerous missed calls from his ex-wife Caroline and their younger daughter Hannah. He also had a voicemail from Hannah, but she was talking something that difficult to understand. Then he heard Caroline screaming in the background, saying, "Emily is dead." Mark was in disbelief. He immediately called his mother in England. When she answered, his world shattered. She was crying uncontrollably. Soon after, a police officer took the phone and said, "I'm sorry to inform you that your daughter Emily is dead." Mark was stunned. Just a week ago, Emily had been on his couch, smiling. As he flew to the UK, the grieving father struggled to accept that his daughter was truly gone. Sadly, it was no dream. The loss of their eldest daughter was an immense heartbreak for Emily's parents. The police informed them that Emily had passed away in her sleep, which didn't make sense to them since she was so young and healthy. While the police gathered some evidence, the circumstances surrounding Emily's death remained unclear, and they would have to wait for the autopsy results. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, told investigators that they had been at home all night and had not heard anything unusual. Meanwhile, Elliot shared his sorrow for Emily on social media by posting photos of them together. The police found no solid evidence to contradict the Turners' claim that Emily had mysteriously died in her sleep. In any death investigation, the crucial task is to determine the cause of death. Identifying the cause helps investigators understand the situation and how to approach the investigation. While they awaited the autopsy results, investigators discovered that a few days before her death, Emily had posted a concerning message on her Facebook page, stating that she had a stalker. Emily detailed in phone calls she received, saying that someone had called her, and when she had asked who it was, they replied that she didn't know them, but they knew everything about her. She had asked how they got her number, and they said they would tell her when they saw her, while persistently asking her out. Emily had hung up, but they kept calling. She made this post on Thursday, May 5th. The police discovered that before her death, Emily had a heated argument with Elliot in front of other patrons at the nightclub. Interrogation with Elliot's friends revealed that he attempted to control Emily's actions and had learned about her meeting with another man. Most alarmingly, they mentioned that Elliot had threatened her life multiple times. However, his friends dismissed these threats, believing they were merely bravado to enhance his gangster image. The autopsy did not determine a definitive cause of death, but experts suggested that strangulation might have occurred, noting that the physical evidence was consistent with pressure applied to the neck. The investigators suspected that a member of the Turner family might be involved in Emily's death, which prompted them to install listening devices in their home. The police aimed to uncover any hidden information, and their suspicions were confirmed. One recording revealed that Elliot was advising his mother on how to interact with the police and what she should say. Lee Turner, Elliot's father, seemed to be the only one aware of the wrongdoing in their actions, but he eventually succumbed to the demands of his son and wife. While reviewing the recordings, investigators discovered details about Emily Longley's death. Elliot Turner confessed to causing her death, leading to his arrest a week later. Although he denied his guilt, his lawyers attempted to dispute the validity of the audio recordings. After thoroughly examining the case, the judge permitted the prosecution to present the recordings as evidence. Unaware that the police were listening, Elliot revealed that he felt angry every day and that Emily had upset him more than anyone else ever had. During the trial in May 2012, Elliot's lawyer argued that he acted in self-defense. Turner explained that a fight in his bedroom escalated, leading him to grab Emily by the neck. He insisted that he did not strangle her and claimed he discovered her dead in his bed the next morning. On the second day of the trial, Elliot expressed his disgust with his actions that night. It was reported that after finding Emily dead, he wrote a letter to his mother expressing his shame and mentioning that he was planning to leave for Spain. This suggests that Elliot intended to leave the country on the day Emily died but ultimately changed his mind for some unknown reason. When the police arrived at his house after receiving a call, they found packed bags, and Elliot had his passport in his pocket. In court, he admitted that he had threatened Emily and felt upset and deceived the night before her death after seeing emails on her phone. He claimed he had forcefully pushed her face into a table and recounted the fight they had before her death, stating that Emily began hitting him with her hands and feet. He attempted to calm her down but eventually gave up. When asked if he planned to kill Emily, Elliot said no. He claimed he thought Emily was asleep and only realized she was dead when she didn't wake up the next morning. In an interview with the Herald newspaper, Emily's father, Mark, expressed the pain of losing his daughter. The reality of death is that it's incredibly difficult. It doesn't matter if it's your child, partner, or even your 99-year-old grandmother. It's painful when someone is here one day and gone the next. This is something we struggle to cope with. All anniversaries are tough, birthdays are tough, Christmas is tough, and Easter is especially hard because that was the last time I truly spent time with her, Mark Longley shared. He shared that the hardest part is knowing he will never see the woman she could have been. I miss watching the life she was denied develop. We had a small but beautiful glimpse of the woman she was becoming, and I felt so proud of her. As her father, I'm naturally biased, but the world truly was a better and more enjoyable place with her in it. During the trial, Elliot Turner was depicted as a privileged young man whose parents tried to protect him from facing consequences. The court revealed that he had free access to his family's home in the wealthy Queen's Park neighborhood of Bournemouth. There, he hosted wild parties for his middle-class friends, as described by his father, Lee. To ensure he didn't bother them, his parents allowed him to use a converted garage as his own living space, giving him the freedom to come and go as he pleased. It was in this room, equipped with a mini bar, that he strangled Emily while they were on his bed. The jury quickly dispelled any illusions Elliot had when they found him guilty on May 22, 2012. The court sentenced him to life in prison, with a minimum term of 16 years. While delivering the verdict, Mrs. Justice Dost described Elliot as arrogant, stating, "Emily was a lovely girl who brought joy to others. You extinguished that light. You didn't love her, she was a trophy to you. The relationship was about your control through aggression and threats. Focus on your life sentence instead of luxury." She also sentenced Elliot to 9 months for perverting justice, to run concurrently. Elliot Turner wasn't the only one involved in the trial. His parents, Anita and Lee, were also implicated. They loved their son and tried to protect him after he committed his crime. Lee destroyed a letter in which Elliot confessed, while Anita removed a jacket from the room where the letter was supposedly found. Additionally, Anita delayed calling for an ambulance, allowing Elliot time to hide evidence and let the family create a credible story for the police. When questioned about her decision to postpone the call, Anita stated that she didn't believe Emily was dead. During cross-examination, they asked her if she believed Emily had ruined her son's life. After a 6-second pause, she answered, "No." In the recording, Lee inquired whether they had made the right decision. Anita responded, "We've done the right thing." Both Anita Turner, 51, and Lee Turner, 54, were found guilty of obstructing justice and received sentences of 27 months in prison. In 2013, after serving half of their sentence, they continue to live in the house where Emily tragically died. Emily's father, Mark, broke down while discussing the verdicts. With support from his ex-wife Caroline and daughter Hannah, he expressed, "What we have heard over these 5 weeks has shocked and disgusted us. It is beyond belief that a man as evil as Elliot could treat such a gentle and loving girl like Emily so violently. We are incredibly proud that she came all the way across the world to seek a better life for herself. Unfortunately, this is the life that Elliot chose to take from her." Mark mentioned that there was much discussion about Elliot's bragging, and no one took his threat seriously until it was too late. He noted that even his mother dismissed it when he texted her about his intention to harm Emily. In October 2020, reports emerged that Elliot Turner's cellmates had assaulted him in prison. This incident followed his decision to display photos of Emily in his cell and brag about receiving letters from female admirers. The attack was triggered after he claimed he would soon go back to his luxurious lifestyle filled with champagne, Bentleys, and attractive women. In 5 years, Elliot Turner will be eligible to apply for early release. We can only hope that the parole board will act wisely and make the right choice concerning someone who has shown no remorse for his actions. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Mallerie Beach. Mallerie Beach was born on April 18, 1999, in Walterboro, South Carolina, USA. She had 2 older sisters, Morgan and Savannah. At 19, Mallerie graduated from Hampton High School and then attended the University of South Carolina. She worked at clothing boutiques in Fort and dreamed of becoming an interior designer. She loved animals, she had dogs and volunteered at an animal shelter. She was a bright and beautiful girl who was sweet, kind, and sociable, with many friends. She was dating Anthony Cook. They were friends with 20-year-old Paul Murdaugh, who came from a wealthy and influential family. On February 23, 2019, the group planned to attend a party at a house owned by the mayor's family. They decided to travel there using the Murdaugh's 5-meter sea hunt boat. The group included Mallerie, her boyfriend Anthony, Anthony's cousin Connor, Connor's girlfriend Miley Altman, Paul, and Paul's girlfriend Morgan. All were under 21, but that didn't stop them from obtaining alcohol and drinking on the boat. Although they could have reached by car, they chose to go by boat to drink beer and other alcoholic drinks en route without encountering the police. Paul was driving the boat and had already been drinking. He used his older brother Buster's ID to buy alcohol at the store, which he was quite proud of. After arriving, they enjoyed drinking and eating oysters. The party went well, and 5 hours later, they headed back home. Paul, now quite drunk, was still steering the boat. He stopped at a bar along the shore to buy more alcohol and drank there with Connor, while their other friends waited outside, eager to get home. At around 2 a.m., Paul and Connor left the bar. Everyone boarded the boat to head home. Under the influence of alcohol, Paul's behavior worsened, and he became aggressive. For half the night, Paul was in his underwear, saying he was hot, despite the cold February weather. His friends even suspected he might have taken illegal substances earlier, as he occasionally did so. Anthony, who was much more sober than Paul, wanted to take control of the boat, but Paul refused, insisting it was his boat. The other friends tried to convince he to let Anthony steer, but which nearly led to a fight on board. Anthony asked he to drop them off at the nearest pier, but he refused and mockingly suggested they call an Uber, knowing they were on a river with no access to cars. His behavior was inappropriate, and his friends argued with him. Paul repeatedly walked away, leaving the wheel unattended. He shouted at his girlfriend, Morgan, then hit her, spat on her, and pushed her so hard that she fell. Mallerie and Anthony were upset by this and stayed at the stern of the boat. After seeing he hit and pushed Morgan, Mallerie yelled at him to stop and calm down. However, he ignored her, angrily glaring before returning to the steering wheel. In anger at Mallerie, he accelerated the boat. It sped up so much that the friends were thrown about. Anthony and Mallerie clung to each other, but they couldn't hold on for long. At 2:20 a.m., the boat crashed into a bridge, causing the friends to fall into the water. When Anthony surfaced, he was quickly swept to the other side of the river by a strong current, but Mallerie wasn't with him. Everyone except Mallerie managed to swim to the shore. She was nowhere to be found, despite their calls and searches. Anthony returned to his friends and searched the water for she, but he couldn't find her. The boat had no lights, and although they used flashlights, the darkness made it difficult to see. Meanwhile, Paul lay in the mud under the bridge, unable to get up. It was cold outside, and the water was freezing in February. Connor called 911 at 2:26 a.m. Anthony continued searching for Mallerie in the water, while Miley stayed on the shore. Morgan, Paul's girlfriend, had hit her head severely and was bleeding. After the call, Connor and Miley climb up the bridge to see if they can see Mallerie from up there, but they still didn't see her. Paul went on the boat to be with Morgan. The police and ambulance arrived promptly to aid Morgan, and the search for Mallerie commenced. Meanwhile, Paul remained on the boat in his boxers, speaking on the phone and gesturing. When Paul finally left the boat, he was smiling and behaving as if nothing had happened. He did not join the search for Mallerie, which angered Anthony so much that he nearly attacked Paul, but the police stepped in to prevent it. The Coast Guard informed all ships to search for Mallerie in the water. Meanwhile, Paul, Connor, Miley, and Morgan were taken to the hospital for treatment. Anthony stayed back to search for Mallerie, despite he being soaked and very cold. At the hospital, the police came to question everyone, but Paul's father, Alex, and grandfather intervened. The Murdaughs, Paul's family, were wealthy and influential. Since 1920, they had held the position of chief prosecutor in the district. They also had their own law firm and were prominent in private practice across the district. They used their influence to pressure the police and hinder the investigation. Night searches for Mallerie failed, and the next day, a large-scale search involving divers and helicopters began. Anthony did not go to the hospital and instead continued looking for she at the river. He spent days helping rescuers search for her. Volunteers eventually found her body on March 3, about 5 miles from the boat wreck site. An autopsy revealed that she died due to drowning and head trauma from a blunt object. She had hit her head, lost consciousness, drowned, and the strong current carried her away from the accident site. About 500 people attended her funeral. It was clear that Paul's irresponsible behavior and drunken boat driving caused this tragedy. However, the influential Murdaugh family went to great lengths to keep Paul out of prison. The police stated that it was unclear who was steering and who accelerated the boat. Paul denied being responsible, though he couldn't recall who it was. However, everyone else on the boat claimed it was Paul. The police argued that the friends' statements were unreliable because they might have been intoxicated. Paul's blood alcohol content was 3 times the legal limit. Investigators found beer and other alcoholic drinks in the boat's refrigerator. CCTV footage showed Paul buying alcohol at a local store, appearing pleased after the purchase. Moments later, he was seen crawling around the boat's refrigerator with beer. The boat's GPS indicated that the friends stopped at the pier around 12:45 a.m. Surveillance videos captured Paul and Connor at a bar, and later, the footage showed all the friends returning to the boat. Mallerie family was frustrated with the inadequate investigation of the case, and the perpetrator will likely go unpunished. They initially filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the store and the individual who sold alcohol to Paul, but it was dismissed. Subsequently, they sued Buster had allowed Paul to use his ID to buy alcohol. This lawsuit was filed on April 18, 2019, which would have been Mallory's 20th birthday. Paul faced 3 felony charges: boating under the influence causing the death of Mallerie and injuring 2 others, Connor and Miley. He pleaded not guilty to all charges and was released on a $50,000 bail awaiting trial. His bail conditions allowed him to travel, consume alcohol, and operate a boat. At his court appearance, Paul, dressed in a plaid shirt, sat in the hallway on the phone, never handcuffed or in a prison uniform, and had never been jailed. While the trials are about to take place, a tragic incident occurred. On June 7, 2021, Paul and his mother, Maggie, were found shot to death at their home near the dog kennels. Alex discovered them at 10 p.m. when he returned. Paul was shot in the chest and head with a shotgun, while Maggie was shot in the head with a rifle. Only shell casings were found at the scene, suggesting 2 different weapons had been used, leading police to suspect 2 perpetrators. The shootings occurred between 9 and 9:30 p.m., shortly before Alex arrived. Paul's phone was found in an unusual position, as if tampered with, and Maggie's phone was missing. It was later located outside the residence using the Find iPhone feature. Fingerprints and DNA from the killer were collected from it. The Beach family sent a letter of condolence to the Murdaugh family. They extends their deepest and warmest sympathies to the Murdaugh family during this terrible time. Having suffered the devastating loss of their own daughter, they praise that the Murdaugh family can find some peace after this tragic loss. They sincerely hopes that someone will come forward and cooperate with the police so that the perpetrator of these senseless crimes can be brought to justice. The police have classified the deaths of Paul and Maggie as a double murder. However, there are currently no suspects, even though the investigation is still ongoing. Many have speculated whether their murders may be related to Mallerie's previous boating accident. But this connection has not been confirmed. Everyone present on the boat that day provided their fingerprints and DNA samples, which did not match those found on the phone of Maggie. While details about the case remain largely undisclosed, it's known that the Murdaugh family had several enemies and received threats, but they ignored these threats. Mallerie's death is not the only one linked to the Murdaugh family. Years ago, their 50-year-old housekeeper was found dead. On February 26, 2018, she allegedly tripped and fell to her death. The Murdaughs paid her family $500,000, and the case was not pursued further. Before that, on July 8, 2015, the body of 19-year-old Stephen Smith, who supposedly had a relationship with Murdaugh's family's eldest son, was discovered on a sandy road. Stephen's face was badly beaten, with a hole on the right side of his forehead and numerous bruises and cuts on his body. However, his clothes and shoes were intact, and his phone and car keys stayed in his pocket. Stephen's car was found several miles away. The medical examiner determined Stephen was hit by a car, despite the lack of skid marks, headlight fragments, or any evidence of an accident. The blow only affected his head. It was suggested that a large vehicle, like a truck, might have struck his head with its side mirror, but the origin of the hole in his head was unexplained. It was also odd that his keys and phone remained in his pocket after such a strong impact. Many believed he had been beaten to death, yet the police closed the case. Rumor has it that everyone is afraid of getting involved with the powerful Murdaugh family, which led to these cases remaining unexplored. In 2021, Connor, one of the boat passengers, also sued the Murdaugh family for trying to blame him as the boat's driver. In memory of Mallerie, a non-profit charity called Mal's Buddy was created, which raises funds to build a new animal shelter in Hampton County, South Carolina. Alex Murdaugh was arrested in July 2022 after a Culloden County grand jury returned an indictment charging him with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime in the deaths of Maggie and Paul. The indictment said Alex shot his wife with a rifle and shot his son with a shotgun. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole on all 4 counts on March 3, 2023. However, Alex maintained his innocence. He soon filed for a new trial, alleging that the court clerk had tampered with the jury. A new trial court judge denied the request in January 2024. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sophia Urudia. The Urudia family lived in Canning Vale, a suburb of Perth with about 35,000 residents. The family included 7 members and a dog. The children were Isabel, the youngest at 3 years old, Sophia, who was 8, Ines, 11, and Gabrielle, who was 14. The parents, though busy with work, maintained a close relationship with their children and treated them well. Josephine, the mother, was a loving and caring woman who worked hard to provide comfort for her family and manage the household. Caring for children from toddler to teenager is a challenging task because the needs of children at each stage are different. The father often had to go on business trips to Hong Kong, resulting in frequent absences from home. 8-year-old Sophia Urudia, a girl attending a Catholic elementary school where she was loved by all her classmates and teachers. Sophia was well-mannered, naturally tactful, inquisitive. She helped her mother and took care of her younger sister. Sophia had many hobbies, including painting and dancing. Her uncle, who lived with them, often helped with the children and frequently took them on outings. On June 26, 2006, the kids eagerly await a trip to the mall, little do they know that a dangerous force is also at work there. It was a regular weekday. The uncle picked up the children after school, and they went to the local shopping center, Leominster. It was a small shopping area, but it had everything local residents needed. 3 children were with their uncle, 14 years old Gabrielle, 11 years old Ines, and 8 years old Sophia. During their walk, Sophia excitedly shared that she had been chosen to perform an interesting Indonesian dance. She was thrilled and proud, and her uncle and siblings praised her. While at the shopping center, Sophia needed to use the restroom and informed them at the checkout. Being familiar with the shopping center, her uncle allowed her to go alone while they finished unpacking and paying for their items. The restroom wasn't far, and Sophia ran off by herself. The uncle watched her until she entered the restroom, not realizing it would be the last time he saw her alive. After paying, they left the store and went to wait for Sophia outside the restroom, but she took longer than expected. Concerned, the uncle moved closer to call out to her, but there was no response. He didn't enter the women's restroom, so he sent Gabrielle and Ines to check both the women's and men's restrooms. Ines knocked on the women's door, but there was no answer. Gabrielle checked the men's restroom, but it was silent. They also tried the nearby disabled restroom, where they heard some noise, but a male voice responded that it was occupied, scaring them away. Worried, Gabrielle and Ines thought Sophia might have exited through another door, possibly heading to a restaurant or becoming lost in the shopping center. Sophia's uncle waited in the hallway, while the rest searched for her around the shopping center. After 10 minutes, Gabrielle couldn't wait any longer and went back to the toilets to call out to her, thinking she hadn't heard him. As he approached the disabled toilet, the door suddenly swung open. A tough-looking guy, about 20 years old, emerged. Their eyes met briefly, and Gabrielle instinctively felt something was wrong. Gabrielle immediately noticed Sophia's discarded school uniform in the waste bin. He moved closer and saw a lifeless, naked body on the floor. By then, the guy had already run down the corridor and was out of sight. Gabrielle rushed to Sophia, but she showed no signs of life. He began to scream in the toilet. The uncle and the other children who were with Sophia at the mall that day quickly arrived at the scene. The police were called immediately, and mall security was notified. The entire mall was closed. Top doctors confirmed the girl's death. They couldn't save her. Forensic experts sealed the toilet and began examining the crime scene to ensure no important evidence was damaged or lost. Gabrielle, who witnessed the criminal, was able to describe him, prompting police to search the mall for the suspicious man who had emerged from the handicapped restroom. During their initial search, the police could not locate him within the premises and assumed he had already escaped. The public was shocked by the brutal crime that had taken place. In what seemed like a safe, quiet place, no one imagined that letting a child go to the toilet could result in losing them forever. This murder would later be deemed the most brutal in Western Australia's history due to the horrific nature of the crime and Sophia's injuries. Unfortunately, the CCTV cameras in the corridor were not working that day. At the time, detectives only had a description provided by Gabrielle, which was clearly insufficient. The crime was committed with horrifying brutality. The child, Sophia, died from suffocation. The attacker not only cut off her air supply but also squeezed her neck so forcefully that her larynx was completely crushed. Her arms were dislocated, and she suffered severe injuries and ruptures due to forced sexual assault. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted about 5 minutes, during which the attacker brutally harmed she. Even the most seasoned detectives, who regularly deal with various crimes, also described the case as the most serious they had ever encountered. Sophia had no reason to use the disabled toilet. It was possible that she was quickly dragged inside by someone. The criminal was probably already inside, waiting for a victim, and Sophia was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, becoming an unintended victim. She was seized so suddenly that she didn't have time to scream. The attacker immediately began strangling her. She stood no chance against an adult man and couldn't even call for help, even though her relatives were nearby and heard nothing. Investigators began compiling a list of all sex offenders in the area and questioned shopping center employees using a portrait of the suspect. It was urgent to find the criminal because panic was spreading throughout the city. People were terrified by the brutal attack on a young girl and were afraid to go outside. Several shopping center employees recognized the man in the portrait as 21 years old Dante Wyndham Arthurs. He is fat, looks very pale, and worked as a packer of vegetables and fruits at one of the stores in the shopping center. On the day of the incident, Dante was on shift but then disappeared. The police became interested in him and checked his criminal history. They discovered that 3 years prior to this murder, he had been arrested for sexually assaulting another 8-year-old girl. At that time, the police lacked sufficient evidence to charge him, so he was released. Early the next morning, around 5 o'clock, detectives, knowing Dante's address, went to his home, where he lived with his parents, just a short distance from the shopping center. They interrogated Dante and searched his residence. During the search, investigators discovered a sports bag containing latex gloves, handcuffs, rope, a knife, and several photographs with personal information. The oldest girl in the photos was 15 years old, and the others were younger. Some photos included details such as names, ages, home addresses, and the shortest routes to reach them using public transport, suggesting he was stalking these girls and planning attacks. However, Sophia was not among these photos. Within hours, Dante was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, as well as sexual assault and forcible detention of Sophia. Dante Wyndham Arthurs was born on August 8, 1984, in Western Australia. His family soon moved to the UK, where they lived for 8 years before returning to Australia. As a teenager, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a condition marked by difficulties with social communication and repetitive, obsessive behavior. During questioning, he neither confirmed nor denied his guilt and did not take the events seriously. He described the situation as if he were an outsider watching the horrific crime occur. He was unable to provide details or explain his motives, suggesting it felt as if the actions were not his own. Furthermore, Dante could not specify whether the sexual assault happened before or after the murder. This detail was crucial because, in Western Australia, sexual assault on a deceased person is not classified as a crime. He claimed his intent was to rape Sophia, but he never meant to kill anyone. Sophia's relatives were shocked by the police's negligence and blamed them for allowing the dangerous criminal to remain free. They pointed out that in 2003, investigators ignored crucial evidence that showed Dante was dangerous. If that evidence had been addressed and he had been held accountable, Sophia would not have encountered him in the restroom that day, and she would still be alive. It was revealed that Dante wasn't even listed among the most dangerous criminals prone. However, this was not Dante's second crime. In 2001, while on vacation with his family, Dante was arrested for sexually assaulting a young girl in another country. However, due to insufficient evidence, he was released, and no information about the incident was shared with the local police. Before Sophia's murder, Dante stalked at least 10 other girls. Later, the public began discussing new disturbing information about the murder of another child. This was the infamous case of 2-year-old James Bulger, brutally murdered on February 12, 1993. His mother had briefly left him unattended behind the door of a butcher's shop in a shopping centre in Liverpool, UK. She didn't intend to stay long as she was just picking up an order, but there was a mix-up, delaying her return. When she came out, her son was missing. She immediately began searching and called the police. James's body was discovered 2 days later. A train had passed over him, but he had died beforehand. A forensic expert identified 42 injuries on James's body, including 10 skull fractures. Because of the numerous injuries, it was impossible to determine which one caused his death. It was later discovered that James had been noticed by two 9-year-old boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, who had skipped school that day. They aimlessly wandered around the shopping center, committing several petty thefts. Upon seeing James, they decided to have some fun with him. They forcibly took him away and brutally assaulted him, hitting him with a 10-kilogram iron bar. They kicked, trampled, and threw bricks and stones at him and poured paint on his face. When they saw James was no longer moving, they dragged him to the railroad tracks and left him to die, hoping to disguise the murder as an accident. The crime was quickly solved thanks to CCTV footage from the shopping center, which showed James being taken away, leading to the arrest of John and Robert. They had previously attempted to kidnap another child in a shopping mall, but the mother quickly intervened and saved the child. It was found that after James left the shopping center, they were seen by 38 people along the way. Passers-by observed they forcefully dragging the child. They claimed that James was their younger brother, and they told others they were taking him to the police station because he was lost. No one intervened in the situation. Investigators suspect the crime was not sexual in nature since the child was not wearing underwear, but the examination could not confirm this for certain. Robert Thompson and John Venables denied any sexual abuse of James but were unable to clearly explain why they undressed the child. John and Robert were sentenced to imprisonment for an indefinite period, meaning they would remain in prison until authorities determined they were no longer a threat to society, with a minimum sentence of 10 years. However, due to public pressure, their minimum sentence was increased to 15 years in July 1994. In 1997, the House of Lords overturned this decision, reducing the minimum sentence back to 10 years. Consequently, they served only 8 years in prison and were released in June 2001. By their release, they had completed secondary and advanced level education. While in prison, they suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, with John frequently experiencing nightmares about James. Importantly, they were given new identities and guaranteed complete anonymity. Any publications revealing their new identities or showing their photographs were officially prohibited. The authorities believed they deserved a second chance at a normal life, and this measure was also taken for their safety, as it was feared that the public might harm them. The public was outraged by the lenient punishment and the protection of their identity. People wanted to know their names and whereabouts to avoid any potential danger. There was skepticism about their ability to reform, which proved justified. On March 2, 2010, John was sent back to prison for storing and distributing explicit photos of children. He received a 2-year sentence and was released in February 2018. Then, he to be charged again. John faced charges for possessing explicit child photos, leading to a 40-month prison sentence. There were reports that he might receive a new identity and undergo plastic surgery at the state's expense to keep his identity hidden, a move James's parents strongly opposed. In July 2019, UK authorities discussed the possibility of relocating him to Canada, Australia, or New Zealand, as maintaining his anonymity in the UK had become too costly. There is almost no information about Robert Thompson. The only known fact is that he was forbidden from communicating with John and was relocated. It is unknown whether he reformed or returned to crime like John. After the murder of Sophia Urudia, many suspected that Dante, who killed Sophia in a restroom, was actually Robert Thompson with a new identity. He received help with relocation and confidentiality, and many details of their biographies matched. Dante lived in Great Britain for 8 years, coinciding with the time of James's murder. In both cases, the victims were found in a shopping center. It is believed there was a sexual motive, and the victims were of a similar age and appearance. However, this theory could not be confirmed. The police denied any connection. The public suspects the denial was due to confidentiality. Many continue to believe they are the same person and consider him very dangerous. The year after Sophia's murder in March, Dante did not plead guilty to any charges. Consequently, the police reduced the charge from premeditated murder to simple murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Additionally, the sexual assault charge was dropped due to the inability to prove it occurred before Sophia's death. This situation highlights the sometimes absurd nature of the Western Australian legal system. Detectives allegedly obtained a confession from Dante, but none of the interrogations were properly recorded, so they could not be used as evidence. At the trial, due to public pressure, Dante was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 13 years. However, he was able to reduce his time on parole. According to the laws at the time of his conviction, Dante was eligible for early release by 2019, with his case reviewed every 3 years. Each time, there is a chance for him to receive a pardon. The next review of Dante's case occurred in 2022, but it was decided to keep him in prison until at least 2025. The family of Sophia and the public hope that Dante, monster, remains incarcerated for life, seeing him as a danger to others. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Samantha Knight and Renee Aitken. Samantha Knight was born in 1977. She lived with her parents in the suburbs of Manly, Australia. But her parents' relationship did not last long, and they divorced. Then, she and her mother moved to Bronte. When she was in 6th grade, they relocated again, this time to Bondi, a suburb of Sydney, where they settled in an apartment on Imperial Street. Their lifestyle was modest. Her mother worked long hours, which forced her to be independent. Her father frequently visited and provided financial support. On August 19th, Samantha, a schoolgirl, turned 9 years old. After classes ended at 4 p.m., she returned home around 4:15 p.m., while her mother was still at work. In the 1980s, it was common in the suburbs to use simple door latches. The neighborhood was calm and safe, and everyone knew each other, allowing children to stay home alone in locked houses while their parents worked. This was considered normal, so Samantha had the freedom to come and go from their apartment while her mother was at work. August 19th was just like any other day. After school, Samantha changed into a pink skirt, a dark blue jumper, and blue sandals before heading out for a walk. A few hours later, her mother, Tess Knight, returned home from work and found a half-eaten sandwich in the kitchen, but little girl was missing. Tess wasn't initially worried, as it was common for Samantha to go for walks with friends and sometimes skip meals to do so. She continued with her evening routine, expecting her daughter to return soon. However, as it got darker, Tess began to feel anxious. Samantha usually came home before dark, and her absence was concerning. She decided to search for her daughter. Since they had recently moved to the area, not many people knew her, making the search more difficult. She asked neighbors, acquaintances, and Samantha's friends if they had seen her, but no one had any information, which heightened her alarm. Without a mobile phone, she couldn't call Samantha or track her whereabouts. When she returned home, Tess checked again to see if Samantha had come back while she was out, but she was still missing. In a state of urgency, she called emergency services to report her daughter's disappearance, Samantha. Soon after, the police came to her house. They spoke with she to gather details about Samantha's disappearance. She was confused and said she didn't know what had happened because she was at work. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the area, so the police had to rely on tips from witnesses who might have seen something unusual. Police immediately interviewed neighbors, friends, family members of Samantha and anyone nearby for clues. Several store employees reported seeing the girl. Samantha had visited at least 3 different sections of the store selling office supplies, and she was last seen walking down the street. Some witnesses thought she might have been talking to a man. However, they did not find anything suspicious. The police had no other leads. They thoroughly searched the area and followed the route Samantha had taken, but they did not find anything relevant to the investigation. The public was soon informed about the incident. The police requested assistance from local residents through the media, sharing Samantha's photo and description of clothing. Local residents acted quickly. The very next day, hundreds of volunteers participated in a search operation throughout the city. The media also extensively covered this tragic incident. The possibility that Samantha had left home was not even considered. She was too young. At her age, kids typically do not run away from home to spend time with friends. All of her belongings were still at home, and she had never displayed any rebellious behavior before. Samantha was a sweet, kind, and calm girl who worked hard in school, leading detectives to believe she had been kidnapped, possibly taken from her home by someone who maliciously opened the door. Local residents is extremely uneasy. There had never been a kidnapping in their quiet suburb. Residents began to scrutinize one another, fear that the criminal may be living in their area. Investigators had little information to investigate, relying mainly on interviews with local shopkeepers. Unfortunately, no one could provide useful leads to help locate Samantha. The investigation was further complicated because in the 1980s and 1990s, methods of tracking missing persons were not well developed. There were no alert systems like Amber Alerts, no DNA testing, and other modern investigative techniques. Therefore, law enforcement agencies need to conduct searches as efficiently as possible. For instance, they created a mannequin dressed like Samantha the day she disappeared to help jog the memories of those who witnessed it, but this did not produce the expected results. Tess was heartbroken. Samantha's father also joined the search for daughter. Initially, he was even considered a suspect, as investigators thought he might have kidnapped his daughter to keep her with him. However, he denied these accusations. He explained that he maintains a peaceful and respectful relationship with his ex-wife and sees his daughter regularly. There was no reason for him to kidnap her. When the investigation gets difficult, detectives must try their best to identify suspects. The relatives of Samantha began to lose hope of finding her alive and feared the worst. Police are also leaning towards the theory that the girl may have died, possibly taken by human traffickers and taken to another country. This theory was explored, but for 12 years, there is no evidence to confirm this. When the police received a significant lead from a woman, they focused on a local resident named Michael Guider. He lived near where Samantha had disappeared, had been in prison since 1996 for child rape and may be a suspect in Samantha's disappearance. Michael's life is full of disgusting incidents. Born in 1950, he grew up in Melbourne with an alcoholic mother and a younger brother named Tim, born in 1953. Eventually, their mother sent them to an orphanage, where Michael faced further sexual abuse from older children, many of whom were under the influence of drugs. Other children also suffered violence, including Tim, but they all remained silent due to threats. Michael's mental health becomes increasingly serious, and as he matures, he begins to negatively impact the other children in the orphanage. When he was 15 years old, he escaped and began a life of petty crime. His younger brother, Tim, no better. He committed armed robbery and was imprisoned for it. After serving his time, Tim seemed to reform. He became a sculptor, got married, and had children, staying out of trouble and off criminal records. In contrast, Michael continued his criminal activities and showed no intention of changing. He never held a steady job and only worked part-time as a gardener, mowing lawns for neighbors. Michael's first arrest came in the 1970s, when he was charged with setting fire to a store. As an adult, he developed a passion for Australian Aboriginal culture and became knowledgeable about rock art. However, in 1996, he was convicted of sexual offenses for molesting 11 children, aged 2 to 16. At least 60 similar charges were brought against him. Some sources suggested that the actual number of victims could be much higher. During the investigation into the child abuse cases, Michael quickly cooperating with the police. This was taken into account during the sentencing. As a result, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Michael usually acts in a consistent manner. He targeted vulnerable single mothers, often those who struggled with alcohol or drug addiction, or those who were easily influenced. By building trust with these women, he presented himself as kind and courteous, manipulating their perceptions to lower their guard. He often sought opportunities to be alone with their children, claiming he wanted to care for them while their mothers were away. Mothers noticed his attentive behavior and had no qualms about leaving him with their children. By posing as a caregiver, he gained access to the children, which he exploited. Michael would give the children Coca-Cola that was laced with sleeping pills. Once they were unconscious, he photographed and sexually assaulted them. Eventually, some children had the courage to tell their mothers about Michael, and the truth was revealed that he was acting like a serial predator. When the police searched his home, they discovered a large stash of photos, numbering in the thousands. Several photos showed instances of sexual abuse while the victim was unconscious, including images of Samantha and one of her friends without clothes. In one of the photos, police discovered the best friend of Samantha. At that time, she was already 21 years old, and detectives attempted to speak with her. However, both she and her mother refused to cooperate. Eventually, they were summoned to court and compelled to testify. Investigators are looking into a connection between Michael, a serial rapist, and Samantha's disappearance. Among the evidence found, police discovered a peculiar album containing newspaper clippings about missing children, including Samantha. Detectives were curious about why he kept these clippings. Normally, criminals often do this to gather mementos related to their crimes. During questioning, Michael claimed he was simply interested in unsolved cases out of curiosity. While this album was not a major issue, when combined with other elements of his criminal record, it raised serious concerns. After reviewing all the evidence, including photographs of violent scenes, police filed 11 additional charges against him. The total sentence for these new crimes was 6.5 years. At that time, investigators were unable to charge Michaels with kidnapping Samantha, but they suspected his involvement in her disappearance and continued to monitor him. While he was in prison, police observed that he was beaten during all interrogations. He endured severe mistreatment, his cellmates attacked and assaulted him, and the guards failing to intervene. In 2000, journalist Denise Hoffman wrote a book about the missing child, Samantha. She was personally acquainted with Michael and highly appreciated his work as a renowned expert on Australian Aboriginal life. He was knowledgeable in this field and had appeared on television. However, despite their friendship and his expertise, Denise had strong reasons to believe that he was linked to the case of Samantha's disappearance. She begins investigating on her own after he confides in her about his wife, who also knows Samantha's mother. Denise noticed that Michael's demeanor changed significantly whenever the conversation shifted to Samantha's case. During these discussions, his expression will change a lot. He began speaking in a strange, muffled tone and appeared increasingly unsettling. This behavior made Denise even more suspicious of him. Unfortunately, Denise were unable to resolve the case and failed to get a confession from Michael. He denied any involvement in Samantha's disappearance, claiming he had only seen her a few times and did not remember her. This was clearly a lie. To assist the police, Michael's younger brother, Tim, agreed to help him confess. Tim underwent intensive training and consulted psychologists to find the most effective method to help Michael tell the truth. Michael was already under significant stress, and as he broke down, he confessed to accidentally killing Samantha in 1986. He described to the detectives what happened the day little girl disappeared. He claimed that he had known Samantha for some time and had earned her trust, which led her to agree to go with him that day. Michael drove her to a remote area in the wilderness. There, he offered her a bottle of CoCA laced with sleeping pills. After she drank it, she lost consciousness. When he began to assault her, she suddenly woke up and started screaming. To silence her, he gave her more sleeping pills, and she passed out again. Afterward, he briefly stepped out of the car for a walk. When he returned, he found that little girl was unresponsive. However, he maintained throughout the interrogation that it was an accident. He claimed he only intended to assault her and never meant to kill her, insisting that he had never killed anyone before. Michael accepts responsibility for his actions towards Samantha, but he did not apologize to her family or leave the courtroom. In 2002, he confessed during the trial to the unintentional murder of Samantha Knight and was sentenced to 17 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Samantha's family were outraged by what they considered a lenient sentence, but this was the maximum penalty for manslaughter at the time. The prosecutor called Samantha's best friend as a witness. This girl, who appeared in photographs and was believed to have also been affected by Michael's actions, had previously refused to speak to law enforcement, citing fears of revealing information. Her silence had serious consequences for many children, including the tragic loss of Samantha. She attended court with her mother, who supported her, but their identities were kept confidential. Samantha's best friend mentioned that she often felt lonely when her mother was at work, so she will go for a walk. During those times, she met Michael, who gave her the attention she craved. Friend claimed that Samantha's mother sometimes left she with Michael and even spent the night with him, during which he molested she. However, Samantha's mother firmly denied knowing Michael and insisted that she never left him alone with Samantha. Strangely, the witnesses later retracted their statements about Samantha without providing any reasons. Finding her remains for burial became extremely important. Initially, Michael claimed he couldn't remember where Samantha's body was. However, several years into his prison sentence, he suddenly recalled that he had buried her in Cooper Park, just a 15-minute drive from her home. Yet, he later changed his story again, saying the body was buried a bit farther away than he originally indicated. On the map, he pointed to an area where a yacht club now stands, which was built just a year and a half after Samantha's disappearance. Despite extensive searches in the area using trained dogs, Samantha's remains have never been located. To this day, her body has not been found, and many doubt it will ever be found. In addition, Michael is also suspected in the disappearance of 5-year-old Renee Aitken, who vanished without a trace in South Wales in February 1984. When there was a thunderstorm, her brother went to check on her and noticed she was missing. He found her bed empty and the front door open. He told their parents, who then called the police. They began searching for her immediately. However, there was a storm at the time, so it's possible that all the evidence was washed away. Initially, the main suspect was Brian James Fitzpatrick. A man with a history of child kidnapping, he lived nearby and knew Renee's family. However, he died in a car accident just weeks before his trial. For many years, the case went cold, but in 2013, police revisited the investigation and looked into Michael. At the time of Renee's disappearance, he worked as a gardener close to their home. A family member recognized that he bore a resemblance to a suspicious man who had been seen behind their house. In Michael's scrapbook dedicated to missing children, there were articles and photos of Renee. Researcher Denise Hoffman believed that Renee's case shared similarities with the disappearance of another girl, Samantha, as both were small and light. Michael could have used drugs to incapacitate Renee's and sneak her out of the house. Michael was skilled at gaining the trust of children, causing suspicions that he was involved in Renee's kidnapping. Detectives questioned him about the incident, but he denied any involvement. They believed him, even though he had previously denied involvement in Samantha's case, which he later admitted. However, the police concluded there was not enough evidence to charge Michael with kidnapping, and Renee's case remains unsolved. She has not been found. Both the police and Renee's family believe she has likely been dead for a long time. While in prison, Michael developed an interest in Aboriginal culture and history, studying various materials on the subject. He authored several works, which were sent to libraries across Australia. In total, he wrote 16 pieces, ranging from 6 to 28 pages long. He also pursued studies in archaeology and earned a degree in that field. Michael was remarkably intelligent, impressing everyone with his capabilities. He has the potential to become a scientist and can contribute to research projects. However, he chose a path of crime. In 2014, Michael became eligible for parole after serving the minimum term of his imprisonment. This made the public extremely indignant, as many people believed he should remain in prison. Individuals like him will never change and will continue to pose a threat to society. Due to public backlash, Michael's request for parole was not granted and he remains in detention. The public, including Samantha's mother, wants Michael to spend the rest of his life in prison. She continued to suffer from the pain of losing her daughter. She could not give her daughter a proper burial and had never seen any sign of remorse from Michael. Supporters of Michael sought to challenge his sentence. They pointed to his participation in 55 therapy programs in prison, claiming he had undergone rehabilitation and was a model prisoner, he deserving of freedom. He behaved well and did not violate prison rules, leading to his release on September 5, 2019, at the age of 68. As part of the bail conditions, Michael was required to stay under strict supervision for an additional 5 years in a special facility for former prisoners. Police fitted him with a tracking bracelet, and he was given a lengthy list of 56 restrictions. These included bans on visiting public places, playgrounds, and schools, a prohibition on contacting minors, restrictions on leaving the country, a ban on changing his name or appearance. He was also subject to regular checks for drug and alcohol use. Despite these measures, there was no guarantee that Michael, the serial rapist, would refrain from committing further crimes. Even his younger brother, Tim, believed releasing him was a mistake. The public was outraged by his release, they fearing that he was already planning new crimes against children. When Michael was released, he had a large tumor in his groin, which he had refused to treat while in prison due to a lack of trust in the medical staff. After his release, he focused on his health, successfully treating the tumor and managing his heart disease. However, he declined medication to reduce his libido because he believed they would interfere with his other medications. Initially, Michael stayed in a shelter near Long Bay, but when the public discovered his location and began to pursue him, he was moved to a secret location. The public was outraged that once his supervision period ended, he would be completely free, able to change his name and appearance, get married, have children, and travel, opportunities that Samantha would never have. This led many to believe that his sentence was unfair. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Gabrielle Whitelaw. Friendship during youth is very important. However, finding a true friend for life can be challenging. Sometimes, people may appear friendly but have hidden selfish motives or even darker intentions. It's not always easy to recognize these signs, and failing to do so can lead to serious consequences. Gabrielle lives in a cozy little town in Nevada, USA. The local economy relies heavily on the mining industry, which provides jobs and supports families. Gabrielle's family moved here from Colorado Springs. Her father Jim had planned to find work in the gold mines. The family was excited about their new life, believing that the town was perfect for them and everything seemed to be going well. Gabrielle was immediately drawn to this vibrant atmosphere. She loved the beautiful natural surroundings, horseback riding and ATV riding, while some consider these activities more suited to boys. This added to Gabrielle's appeal as an active and adventurous young woman. Gabrielle has a close bond with her brother James, who is only a year older than her. They spend a lot of time playing game. Their family, united and loving, always supports each other through difficult times. Even when their parents decided to divorce, they handled the situation calmly to protect their children from emotional distress. After the divorce, both parents maintained a friendly relationship and resolved issues related to property division and child custody without conflict. After the divorce, her mother, Alicia, moved away but chose to live nearby so they could co-parent. Both parents took turns caring for Gabrielle and James and maintained open communication, which helped ease the emotional impact of the divorce on the children. This approach allowed Gabrielle to grow into a strong and intelligent young woman. She became very independent and faced challenges without fear. From a young age, Gabrielle helped her parents with housework. By the age of 16, Gabrielle was skilled at horseback riding, herding cattle, and helping on the farm, and was admired by her family and neighbors for her diligence and professionalism. She was cheerful and easy to get along with. After finishing school, Gabrielle plans to attend college to study psychiatry and help people struggling with mental disorders. Gabrielle has always been empathetic to the pain of others, which is what led her to pursue this career path. However, in 2020, Gabrielle faced bullying at school. Her best friend noted that many of her classmates suddenly turned against her that year for no apparent reason. This friend suspected that envy and jealousy were the main causes, as many girls were jealous of Gabrielle's beauty and intelligence and targeted her for bullying. Eventually, Gabrielle had to switch schools, but she remained optimistic. She had a small group of close friends who truly loved and supported her. Gabrielle started to spend more time on horse racing, where she met others who shared her interests. One of them was Bryce Dickey, who was a couple of years older than her. They quickly became friends, and Gabrielle often referred to him as an older brother. However, it seemed that Bryce wanted something more than friendship. He spent a lot of time with her, and she got along well with his family. Bryce was known to be a kind and polite young man who, like Gabrielle, was always willing to help those in need. Gabrielle and Bryce became close friends because of their similar personalities. They made plans to meet up, as they often did. That day, Gabrielle was at her father's house, where he was practicing with his rock band. She was eager to spend time with her father. She was chatting happily with the band members and even invited Bryce to watch. Unfortunately, Bryce missed practice. Bryce then plans to pick Gabrielle up by car to his house to watch a movie and promises to drop her off later. When her father Jim got home around 7:30 p.m., he discovered that Gabrielle was not home. He searched the house, calling her name, but received no response. Worried, Jim tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This was unusual, as Gabrielle was usually responsible. She was never late, and it seemed unlikely that she would forget to come home on time. The worried father called Gabrielle's brother James, but he also had no idea where she was. Jim then called Bryce to ask about his daughter. Bryce told Jim that after driving around the city for a few hours, Bryce dropped Gabrielle off near the school, where she met a guy he didn't recognize. Bryce then left to avoid interrupting their conversation. Jim asked Bryce again why they didn't go to the movie as planned. Bryce explained that he and Gabrielle had simply changed plans and decided to drive along country roads. Naturally, Jim was anxious to know who Gabrielle had met, but Bryce couldn't provide any details. He described the man as a tall, blond young man with the appearance of a cowboy. Jim was surprised by Bryce's words. He didn't understand who this stranger was or why Bryce would leave Gabrielle with a stranger instead of taking her home as planned. Bryce had always made sure to take care of Gabrielle, so this behavior seemed unusual. Bryce was very worried about what had happened. He felt guilty for not taking Gabrielle home, explaining that she had asked him to leave. Bryce now realized that the situation could be serious and that something might have happened to her. He remembered that the stranger was driving an old RD F-150 pickup truck. This only added to the family's worries, as none of her friends owned such a vehicle. Gabrielle's family tried calling her hundreds of times, but each call went straight to voicemail. Concerned, her parents decided to contact the police. However, as usual, the police assumed that Gabrielle had probably just run away or gone out with friends and would return soon. However, her parents knew that this was not normal for Gabrielle. She had very few friends and none of them knew where she was. Gabrielle had no family problems, addictions, or mental health concerns, and there had been no recent conflicts. To her family, her sudden disappearance was a clear indication that something serious had happened. The sheriff realized the seriousness of the situation. He gathered all the information available from Gabrielle's friends and acquaintances. The police then contacted Bryce to request a meeting near the school where Gabrielle had gone missing, to provide details about what happened after he dropped her off. Bryce said that he had spent the day with Gabrielle and that they had been driving around the Spring Creek area in his car. However, during their outing, his father called unexpectedly and asked him to come home immediately to help with some errands. Understanding the situation, Gabrielle agreed to reschedule their trip for the next day, but she asked to be dropped off near the school. She also mentioned that she wanted to meet her new friend, Jetty. Bryce reported that after Gabrielle exited his car, she walked directly towards a green pickup truck where a white man in a cowboy hat was sitting. He observed her but then drove off, unsure if she entered a stranger's vehicle. The Bryce had a poor recollection of the details and did not note the pickup truck's license plate. During the conversation, the police found no reason to suspect Bryce. He seemed innocent, so they decided to release him and continue investigating other clues. The police wanted to draw public attention to the case using the media, believing that someone might have seen the man in the cowboy hat and driving the green pickup truck. Initially, the police focused on identifying the license plate number. Additionally, the sheriff contacted the phone service provider to determine the last known location of Gabrielle's cell phone. They discovered that her phone had been active near the school where Bryce had dropped her off. As a result, the police rushed to that location in hopes of finding new evidence, but they found nothing suspicious there. Gabrielle's family and friends continued to search the streets, hoping to find any clues to her whereabouts in the city and surrounding areas. They distributed and posted more than 500 flyers, but local residents remained unresponsive and there were no new leads for the investigation. It felt as if Gabrielle had disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, Gabrielle's mother Alicia created a social media group to share updates and information about the search, but the effort yielded no results. Then, out of the blue, she received a text message from an unknown number. The sender claimed to have kidnapped Gabrielle and demanded a $25 ransom, threatening to harm her if Alicia did not pay. After some time, the kidnappers sent another text message, saying that Gabrielle was sick and would die without the medicine. The kidnapper insisted that he would only provide the medicine if he received the money he demanded. Initially, the parents agreed to the kidnapper's demands, but they decided to contact the police first. Alicia called the police to report the situation. They quickly asked her to come to the station so they could trace the phone number. It seemed that the investigation had turned up an important lead. While police were trying to track down the phone number used by the kidnapper, one of the search team leaders contacted the police. He informed them that volunteers were searching about 20 kilometers from the city when they discovered a puddle of what appeared to be dried blood on the side of the road. The search team got out of their vehicles and began searching the area, where they eventually discovered a blue tarp in the bushes. Underneath, they found the body of a girl lying face down, her clothes matching Gabrielle's description. One of the police officers entered the office and announced that the interview with Alicia would have to be postponed because they had to go to the scene where the body was discovered. Alicia began to cry, and upon arriving at the scene she identified Gabrielle. Forensic experts determined that Gabrielle had been raped, as her pants and underwear were pulled down to her ankles. She had been strangled and her throat had been slit. Which was the cause of death? Police found Gabrielle's headphones tangled in a nearby tree branch. They also found a used condom and its packaging near her body. This provided a clue to the investigation. Police wanted to learn more about Jetty, Gabrielle's new acquaintance, but no one could provide specific details about him. Finding this individual became a top priority. Gabrielle's family received significant support from social networks, with Bryce being particularly notable. He maintained close contact with Gabrielle's mother, father, and brother, offering help and expressing his sorrow. He described Gabrielle as a bright person and a close friend he would never forget. Meanwhile, the police began their investigation by obtaining warrants to search the Gabrielle's computer and mobile phone. They also needed to analyze the evidence they had collected, including DNA found on a condom, which was crucial for solving the case. It was suspected that Gabrielle might have been targeted by an internet predator with a history of sexual violence. The police quickly created and reviewed a list of registered sex offenders in the area who might have been connected to the incident. To identify the criminal, all the information needed to be compared. However, this process took a long time, causing the investigation to drag on. Meanwhile, the police quickly checked the information from the kidnapper. They were able to trace the phone number that called the Alicia to demand a ransom. Unfortunately, this number was not registered in Nevada. It was a hidden number bought online, making it impossible to track. The police first wanted to identify Jetty, who was considered the prime suspect in the case. After obtaining information from Gabrielle's phone, the police quickly located him. However, they were disappointed to discover that Jetty was in Alaska at the time of Gabrielle's death. Although they had met shortly before the incident and had planned to meet again, he was not the one who raped and murdered her. He had an alibi. He had not left Alaska during that time. The police decided to investigate all other people with similar initials, driving similar cars, and living in the city, surrounding areas, and near where the body was found. They were only able to identify two young men driving a green pickup truck, but both had alibis, as they were far away at the time of the murder. This stalled the investigation. The police then contacted Gabrielle's family again, hoping to get new information. Alicia said that in the weeks before her death, Gabrielle had been dating a guy who was pursuing a cowboy lifestyle, living on a ranch and competing in rodeos. They quickly broke up because Gabrielle wasn't ready for intimacy. After the breakup, they remained friends, but during some nasty arguments, he made extreme comments about wanting her dead. After verifying his alibi, it seems the investigation has stalled once again. However, the police took one last approach to identifying the suspect. They decided to review all the city's surveillance camera footage, specifically looking for a green pickup truck driven by a cowboy. Fortunately, there were several high-quality cameras along the route Gabrielle took before her death and captured clear images. Police had to analyze multiple videos that had been recorded. Despite their efforts, they were unable to find the green pickup truck that Bryce had mentioned. However, police did find something interesting. The blue Chevy pickup that Bryce himself drove really was on the recording. He did not stop or let anyone out, which suggests that he lied about the green pickup truck. The police then decided to trace the route the blue pickup took. Bryce had previously claimed he had been driving around the area with his girlfriend for several hours, but this was proven false by the video evidence. The police decided to request data from Bryce's cell phone to compare his geographic location with that of the assault victim. They quickly obtained a warrant to access this data and did not notify him to avoid alerting a new suspect. It was clear that he had been with Gabrielle all day because their movements matched until her cell phone turned off. Additionally, he was present at the location where Gabrielle's body was discovered before returning home. This indicated that Bryce was present at the crime scene and may have committed or witnessed the crime. To verify the assumption, an examination was conducted. The Bryce was immediately asked to undergo tests and provide DNA samples. He agreed. He was later released, but the police did not reveal their suspicions. Instead, they acted as if everything was normal and collected samples from everyone in the area. Skin particles were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, and these samples matched Bryce's DNA. It was clear that he had sex with Gabrielle, but everything happened involuntarily. Bryce was called in for questioning again. Bryce agreed to be questioned without hesitation, remaining calm and confident. The police asked him if he had ever had a relationship with Gabrielle, especially sexual. He denied these allegations, claiming that he considered her like a younger sister. Bryce's statements raised suspicion because if he was telling the truth, his DNA would not have been present at the crime scene. However, police discovered a condom containing his semen at the scene of the murder. Feeling that the police were onto something, Bryce changed his story, claiming that Gabrielle had flirted with him and that they had consensual oral sex while using a condom. Bryce later stuck to his story about a man in a green pickup truck, repeatedly claiming that he could not provide a clear description of the cowboy or the truck's license plate. However, multiple traces of Bryce's DNA were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, in her private parts, and even on her neck, near the fatal stab wound. Additionally, based on Bryce's movements and the surveillance camera footage, it was confirmed that he did not stop anywhere else. This indicated that he was lying. Under pressure from the police, Bryce eventually confessed that what happened to Gabrielle was an accident. He mentioned that she wanted to have rough sex with a knife, and in a moment of passion, the blade accidentally stabbed her. This explanation seems very unlikely, especially given his history of dishonesty. Bryce Dickey, 18, was arrested on March 19, 2020. Following his arrest, police searched his home and vehicle. At Bryce's home, police discovered several bloody items in his closet, including a knife that was determined to be the murder weapon. In the trunk of his car, they found a bloody sweatshirt with Gabrielle's blood on it, along with multiple fingerprints and DNA samples linking Bryce to the crime. When Gabrielle's family received the news, they were completely stunned. Her family had always considered Bryce a good young man, and he had treated them like family, considering him Gabrielle's best friend. The family had trusted Bryce as if he were their own, not knowing that he would betray them in such a terrible way. While the townspeople saw him as the true cowboy and a good person who would help others in times of need, he was actually hiding his true nature. Gabrielle's family trusted him. He made sure she got home safely and gave her regular rides, which seemed thoughtful. However, his intentions were not noble. He was actually trying to get close to his victim. In May 2022, the prosecution presented several credible testimonies, including testimony from Bryce's ex-girlfriend. She described him as aggressive and cruel, often getting into arguments. She recounted that he had choked her at least 4 times during their conflicts, with the last incident being so severe that she felt she was on the verge of death. She ended her relationship with Bryce, who had been stalking and threatening her for a long time. It was only when her parents threatened to call the police that he stopped. The jury then deliberated for about an hour and unanimously found Bryce Dickey guilty of first-degree murder and rape. The judge sentenced Bryce Dickey to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. He received an additional 20 years for using a deadly weapon, another 20 years for kidnapping, and 10 more years for rape. In total, he will serve 70 years before he can seek release. Bryce did not explain his motive for the crime. However, a friend of Gabrielle's revealed that just days before the murder, Bryce confessed his love to her, but she suggested they remain friends. Police believe that Bryce could not handle the rejection and felt resentful. When he learned that Gabrielle was seeing a new boyfriend named Jetty, he became angry and sought revenge. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Riley Whitelaw. Riley Whitelaw was born on January 20, 2005 in Colorado Springs, El Paso County, USA, the only child of Courtney, a single mother. From an early age, Riley demonstrated kindness, empathy, and respect for others. Her bright smile brought warmth and joy to everyone around her. Riley loves to draw and wants to learn to play the guitar. After attending the Air Force Academy, she proved herself to be an excellent student. Among her classmates, she was known for her calm demeanor, confidence, and leadership skills. When Riley was a teenager, her mother met a man named Chris Johnson. Their relationship quickly developed into love, leading to the decision to marry. Riley, who always wanted the best for her mother, did her best to adapt to the changes Chris brought to their home. Chris, who never had the opportunity to be a father, welcomed Riley with open arms and treated her like his own daughter, expressing that he felt lucky to be a part of her life. In 2021, Riley is 16 years old, she is more mature, and gets a part-time job at a branch of an American company that operates the second-largest pharmacy chain in the country. This pharmacy not only sells medicines and healthcare products but also provides photography services. Riley only works 2 days a week because she still has to continue her studies. Despite her busy schedule, she feels happy and enthusiastically accepts the challenge. At first, everything goes smoothly. Riley enjoys her job and always completes her tasks. She quickly gains the appreciation of customers and builds good relationships with her colleagues. Among Riley's co-workers is a man named Joshua Johnson. Not much is known about his background, but he is in his 30s and has just been released from prison. The appearance of Riley, a young girl at the pharmacy, changes his life. Joshua, who is withdrawn and hot-tempered, is Riley's complete opposite. Despite their differences, Joshua develops feelings for her. Everyone around him notices this and realizes his unusual intentions, considering Riley's age. However, he insists that he will wait until she is an adult before asking her out. Joshua cannot hide his feelings for Riley for long and begins to show his attention to her, trying to win her over. He eventually openly confesses his love for her. However, Riley does not have feelings for him. After being rejected, Joshua becomes hurt and begins to act out, trying to hurt Riley whenever possible. During a class where he is supposed to teach her and another coworker about how to work in a photo lab, he completely ignores her. This behavior frustrates Riley, as it negatively affects the quality of her work. Joshua refuses to answer her questions or offer any help. Initially, Riley was upset and often reflected on Joshua's behavior toward her, wondering what she had done to deserve such negative treatment. However, over time, Joshua crossed the line. First, he touched her inappropriately. And then he slapped her. Riley felt both angry and offended by these actions. She realized that Joshua was invading her and her personal space. Riley chose to speak up about the incident. Gathering her courage, she informed the pharmacy manager, Justin Sunni, about what had happened. Justin helped to remind Joshua. Joshua remained silent and pretended to understand. Nothing else was done to protect Riley. Not wanting to worry her mother, Riley decides to keep the meeting between her, Joshua, and her manager Justin a secret. However, she still shared with Courtney the impact Joshua's behavior had had on her. For a while, they barely worked together, and Riley tried to forget about the incident. However, when she decided to increase her hours, she found herself scheduled to work the same shift as Joshua. In early 2020, she met Jacob Lee, who was 2 years older than her. As their relationship developed, they decided to date. Suddenly, Jacob decided to work part-time at the pharmacy, just like Riley. In early spring 2022, Jacob started working, allowing them to spend more time together. Like Riley, Jacob quickly became friends with all the employees, except Joshua. Although there were no major conflicts between them, Joshua always seemed uncomfortable whenever they had to work together. Jacob wasn't the only one who noticed. The second manager, Crystal Ismail, also noticed that Joshua was jealous of Jacob because he was Riley's boyfriend. Joshua saw Jacob as his rival. Joshua still didn't give up on his love and continued to try to get closer to Riley. Feeling frustrated by his harassment, Riley finally asked for a change in her working hours. After a while, Riley needed more money and wanted to work overtime. Her boss informed her that she would have to work the same shift as Joshua because she had no other choice. Riley shared her concerns with Jacob. Riley shares her concerns with Jacob, but he doesn't take her words seriously and doesn't realize the severity of the situation. This disappoints Riley. On June 11, 2022, Riley was at the pharmacy where Crystal was in charge of management, and everything was going smoothly. Although Joshua was on the same shift as Riley, he took advantage of his coworker's distraction to enter the break room. First, he placed a busy sign on the bathroom door, then blocked the view of one of the surveillance cameras with containers, and finally taped the window. The exact details of what happened next remain unclear, but when it was time for Riley's break, she entered the break room where Joshua was hiding, ready to put her plan into action. At approximately 5:44 p.m., surveillance camera footage captured a customer named Alicia Shanky in the store when she heard a woman scream. Seconds later, she heard the door close, but Alicia ignored it. She made her purchase and left the store. Meanwhile, in the break room, Joshua attacked Riley with a knife, and the attack was both quick and brutal, and Riley died instantly. Crystal, the store manager, becomes concerned when Riley does not return to work after her break and becomes even more suspicious when she notices that Joshua is also missing. She quickly goes outside the door where the trash can is. As she approaches, she sees someone's bare feet and, feeling scared, she rushes back to the pharmacy, locking the front desk door to prevent anyone from entering. This allows Joshua to dispose of Riley's blood-stained items in the trash without being seen. He then returns home. A few minutes later, Crystal mustered up the courage and went outside again, but the person was gone. Unable to find Riley, she decided to contact the manager, Justin. She also called Jacob, but he had no information on Riley's location. Justin then went to the pharmacy to investigate the situation. It was a little after 6 p.m. when he arrived. When he arrived, he quickly began reviewing the surveillance camera footage and saw Riley walking towards the break room. In an earlier recording, he noticed Joshua stacking boxes and containers to block the camera's view. Justin walked into the break room, quickly opened the door, and turned on the lights. He was horrified to see blood everywhere. And in the corner of the room, he found Riley's body. Shocked, Justin called the police at 6:05 p.m. 10 minutes later. Officers arrived at the pharmacy, where they discovered Riley's body. She was found on the floor with her badge and headphones nearby. In addition to the severe neck injury, she had suffered several other injuries. Alicia, a customer at the pharmacy during the day, passed by the scene that evening and noticed police and patrol cars. She stopped to report the screams she had heard earlier. Police officers Steve Alonso and Mike Lee began their investigation. Meanwhile, someone informed Riley's mother, Courtney, of the tragic news. The distraught mother rushed to the pharmacy and was stunned when she arrived at the crime scene. When asked by police if she knew anyone who Riley's enemies were or who might have committed such an act, Courtney did not remember Joshua. She believed her daughter was the victim of a robbery and did not know that her daughter was actually murdered by a coworker. Police collected evidence at the crime scene and sent the body for forensic examination. The Riley had 42 stab wounds, and there were similar injuries on her hands, suggesting she attempted to defend herself. Experts concluded that she died from a lack of oxygen. Joshua fled the city early in the morning but was stopped by a patrol officer as he headed toward the New Mexico border. The officer was unaware of his actions and arrested him based solely on his appearance, as his face was covered in cuts, scrapes, and bruises. When asked about his injuries, Joshua claimed that he had been attacked in a store in Colorado Springs. However, when the patrol officer contacted Colorado Springs police, they discovered that Joshua was actually the suspect in Riley's murder and not the victim. Afterwards, he was arrested and brought back to the city. Currently, the pharmacy's representatives are not making any statements to the media. Police have denied permission to share information that might disrupt the ongoing investigation. The pharmacy has closed its doors and is no longer serving customers. Nearby, the community has set up a makeshift memorial for Riley, adorning it with numerous flowers, letters, and gifts from those who are grieving. Joshua admitted during his initial police interview that he was in love with Riley. He admitted to being in the break room with her but claimed that the incident was accidental. This confession led police to identify him as the person who had been near Crystal at the dumpster. Despite the evidence against him, Joshua maintained his innocence and denied obstructing the view of the security camera. Police later discovered his DNA on the murder weapon. After obtaining a court warrant to search his home, they found a black hoodie with blood and traces of DNA belonging to Riley. Joshua was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail in El Paso County, with his trial scheduled for June 2022. Riley's funeral was held on June 23, 2022. Her mother received many letters of support from classmates, pharmacy customers, and others. On November 15, 2022, Joshua pleaded not guilty to all charges at his preliminary hearing. The trial was originally scheduled to begin on March 6, 2023, but the defense requested additional time to prepare and requested that Joshua undergo a mental health evaluation to determine whether he was competent to stand trial. As a result, the trial was postponed. The evaluation later determined that Joshua was sane. He remains in custody at the El Paso County Jail, with bail set at $10 million. In late September 2023, after all attempts to postpone the trial, Joshua finally appeared in court and faced Riley's relatives. On the first day of the trial, the prosecutor explained to the jury that Joshua and Riley both worked at a pharmacy and detailed the events that took place there. The defense maintained that Joshua happened to be at the crime scene. They presented that Joshua entered the break room and found Riley lying on the floor. At that point, he was attacked by an unknown assailant, causing him to flee for safety, despite feeling guilty for leaving Riley behind. However, witness testimonies have made it clear that Joshua's account is incorrect. One of the longest testimonies came from Justin, who discovered the body and was the pharmacy manager that first contacted the police. The prosecutor's office also called Riley's mother, Courtney, to testify. She shared insights about her daughter, describing her as someone who loved to help others. Courtney mentioned that Riley had expressed concerns about Joshua's behavior on several occasions. She recalled one incident when Riley was working with Joshua in the photo services area, where he touched her inappropriately. This led Riley to speak with her supervisors, resulting in her being allowed to change her work schedule. In October 2023, after arguments from both the prosecution and defense had concluded, after an hour of deliberations, the jury reached a verdict. Joshua Johnson was convicted of first-degree murder. The judge expressed gratitude to everyone who contributed to achieving justice, especially the Colorado Springs police. After the trial, some expressed their anger toward Joshua, while others chose to remember Riley as a kind, young girl who tragically lost her life because of his actions. On the podium in the auditorium, there were 3 items: an empty vase, a bag containing 42 purple stones, and a small bouquet of sunflowers. Riley's loved ones had brought these items on purpose. The stones represented the number of wounds Riley had suffered. Each person giving a speech took a handful of stones and put them in a vase. The 9th and final speaker was her mother, Courtney. She wore a jacket with the insignia of the National Guard, where her daughter served. Despite her deep grief, Courtney spoke very strongly that she would not let Joshua, whom she called a monster, take away her love for her late daughter. People admired her for this, considering it her greatest strength. She emphasized that her daughter was never afraid to express her opinion when things were not going well and always confidently led others. At the end of her speech, Courtney placed the sunflowers in a vase containing 42 purple stones before returning to her seat. At the end of the hearing, Joshua Johnson was sentenced to life in prison. Courtney established a memorial fund in Riley's name, which provides scholarships to high school graduates. In the future, Courtney plans to organize charity events that she believes Riley would have enjoyed, including art nights, exhibitions, and running.